I love a good King of the Hill. A King of the Hill, I feel like is that map that can be anyone's game. So if Scatterbrain's going to pull out the stops, it's most likely not going to be on something quite standard that Baltune has played about 6 million times. So King of the Hill is probably the way to do it. And we see a Rus pick coming out here as well. Now, Rus has been a prominent pick on most maps, but on King of the Hill, I can see it definitely working with the amount of wood you got at your disposal as well. So, how are we feeling, Tim? How do you feel about this King of the Hill coming in hot?
Honestly, I love that King of the Hill is in the map pool because I love casting it. I think you get some very climactic finishes at the end with Sacred Sites like we did for the last series, but I absolutely hate to play it, so I'm glad I'm just sitting here talking about it. For the Rus, it's always been a good King of the Hill map, not only just because of that wood line that's there, you get those deer packs, you have a potential for professional scouts, but also you get some rather crazy high trade house areas because of the edges of the map being forest. You can get yourself, park that high trade house in a little quarter, wham, bam, how you doing? I get 200 gold for free. So we might be able to see that from Scatterbrained. Baltune on the other side, for a notoriously cavalry civilization with horse archers and knights and boyars fortitude, the Abbasid dynasty have the ability to make sure none of that matters and goes for camels if they want to. So I think for the Abbasids, I think it's going to be important for the Big Tuna to play the map that he's given. Obviously that sacred site is very important, but if you sit there and go economic wing in a bunch of town centers and sit in your base, that could be the reason you lose, because there's only one sacred site there and you get put on a timer pretty quickly. So we'll see what Tuna's strategy is. But for this map, I mean, Rus is always King of the Hill. They're almost King of the Hill of King of the Hill.
Yeah, I remember King of the Hill back in its olden days. Everybody used to choose English and put down the White Tower, and it was a race for the White Tower. But then people learned how to use their mouse and their keyboard, and they started to put some aggression on it. Pretty crazy stuff, actually. So my question is just, what is Abbasid's key on King of the Hill? What makes them viable on King of the Hill? Because Rus, they do have a lot of cards they can pull out. But my question is more, what did Baltune think here choosing Abbasid? And I think Twitch Chat can even enlighten us here, because, I mean...
Tim? Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be about the economic outscaling, right? I mean, I get it for the Abbasids going on Eco Wing and getting your town centers quickly and all that kind of stuff, but you can transition to that late game economy probably the quickest, right, for the Abbasid dynasty, just because you get some crescents that are absolutely fertile. You get some foodstuffs that are so fresh, the amount of preservatives they put in there. So you will have the ability to get that economic lead, and then hopefully transition that into a stronger military where if the Rus do go up there and get that sacred site first, maybe you're able to power through it, right? But you gotta remember, for the Rus, they don't really use a second town center anymore. They don't really do that 2 TC Kremlin build that we used to have a while ago. You get to Castle Age pretty quickly. You use the Golden Gate for resources. You use the High Trade House, which gives you passive resources, and then you don't have to go through the extra town centers and the stuff that Abbasid has to go through. So I think it's going to translate a little bit quickly. Baltune's probably going to end up being the aggressor of the hill, and Scatterbrain's going to be more so the one who takes it first and has to stay defensive.
And it's going to have to take a lot, because we've seen the power of Abbasid when they start pushing. The cheap farm transition, the cheap economy in general, just makes sure that they can outproduce so quickly. But now I want to just quickly take a look at the rest of the draft here, because a lot of people are like, hey, why don't we see any of this civilization? Why don't we see any of that civilization? We finally have English in a draft. So Baltune, he's got English in his pocket. He's got Aeobids, pretty standard. Azushi, also a little bit more common these days. Etrurian French, we've seen them a lot. But on the Scatterbrained side, I feel like the poor man got a little bit outdrafted here. He did get Byzantines in his pocket. And he did get Japan for those hybrid and water maps, but I feel like Baltune's package that he's got right here, it's got a lot more beef to it. Oh goodness, what did I just say that? Oh
yeah, maybe we can. I'm gonna look past it. Maybe for Scatterbrained, he's thinking about specific civs for some of these maps, right? I mean, looking at what Scatterbrained is doing, Japan is probably your 4 lakes choice. And then Lakeside, you could, now this is just the theory, you know, we're just sitting here BSing for a minute. Okay, so Lakeside has the ability, wham and stiff upper lip, let's keep it together. For Lakeside, you have the ability for, maybe you do some Malians nonsense with Lakeside, get a transport ship in Dark Age and make a little bit of, you know, have some chaos, some razzle dazzle. It definitely could scatter a neuron or two. So that's an opportunity for it. For Baltune on the other side, rather traditional in terms of his stuff. So HRE we have not seen yet, which is pretty interesting. We know how strong they are. Zushi with their fast castle could be pretty crazy too. You know, with something really good like a Cliffside, maybe that's a good idea. Well, going to be remain to be seen. But this game number 1 is the one that's going to set the tone and decide some of those civs later. And Wayman, I am so ready. Our first round of 8 qualifiers, the decider round. Who gets in to the main event between Baltune and Scatterbrained? Let's get in there. And here we are.
Here we go. Mr. Baltune there with a scout. Beautiful, beautiful horse work. We see 4 legs going straight towards the sheep. Yet another one. Ding, 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 says the sheep bell. And they're going pretty strong on that map. Beautiful leg work there by the scout. Very well done by Baltune.
Yeah, it's very good. And I'm very glad you ended up putting that joke behind you. For that one, I didn't want to bring it up again, but I think your ability to transition out of that definitely warrants a compliment. So congratulations on that one. Scatterbrained playing as the Roos in the color blue on the western side of the map with a couple hunting cabins as per usual with this one. So with Baltune, the big tuna, going with that Abbasid dynasty, let's kind of take a look at his spawn a little bit. This gold, Wayman, is pretty far out there.
It feels like it's quite vulnerable to some shenanigans. Luckily, Roos doesn't have a lot of shenanigans in the early game like they used to. We used to fear Roos like we feared a French that had a little bit of a miss macro and a misclick, and the night was a few seconds late. But now, Baltune with that gold all the way out there in China, I want you guys to see that both golds are there. So if he can secure that with a very tiny wall, with a very tiny spearman, he should be okay against most aggression here. But it also leaves that question of, when I do lose control, what then?
You know, I mean, when you're talking about King of the Hill and walling, this is a relatively easy map to wall, right? Because you have both of those areas, like where the mountain cliff actually is, and the forest just providing your excellent defense. And obviously in the middle is pretty open, but that's where your hometown center is anyway. So you have the ability to, if you're Baltune and you want to be a little bit defensive, you have the opportunity to do that and wall yourself up. And that's what Baltune is doing. He's going for the economic wing, I would imagine. He's going to be on stone pretty soon. That stone being rather forward, so hopefully he gets that one as quickly as possible. I'm curious to see, because we've seen Roos players a while ago, not necessarily this season, but going for the Kremlin and smacking that SOB right in front, where that front sacred site is, right onto the hill. Scatterbrained says, no, I don't think I'm ready to absolutely lose my mind, and is going to go for the Golden Gate.
Now, Baltune is going ahead and killing some of these deer. Now, I'm wondering what the play here is with that. Maybe just causing a little bit of chaos and not just easy expansion. But the Golden Gate coming out there is pretty standard at this point. I think for a long time, we only saw Kremlin as the viable choice. And I'm so happy to see the Golden Gate is showing its face. But honestly, it's a little bit scary. I feel like most of civilizations don't have a response to it. There's not much you can do against the Golden Gate. And even when you do something, Baltune, if he goes for, let's say, 2 TC, and Scatterbrained decides, okay, I'm going fast castle. He's going to pick up all the relics. He's going to have a knight there. And you're still going to be stuck in feudal. So Abbasid definitely has a bit of a harder time here, I would say. And now, remember what I said earlier in the cast, for those of you who didn't come from the Beastie raid? We talked about how those scouts don't just provide the deer control. They also have the ability to burn stuff. And honestly, when you lose wood this early in the game to repairing this, it's definitely worth it. These scouts are doing so much work because you want to delay those TCs as much as possible.
Yeah, I think the goal is you probably have the ability to get all of that stone before you have to worry about repairing the mining camp. I did want to offer a little bit of explanation on the fact of why Baltune is killing these deer. So when the deer are alive, you can use professional scouts and auto queue every deer in the pack. When they're dead, you actually need to have vision on them. So you can't just go ahead and click on all of them. You need to be within the site, go to the deer back itself, and then click it. So you can't auto go through all of them. That professional scouts increase, or that professional scouts increase in play that we've seen so much, is a lot of it because it is a little less micro intensive. It's a little bit easier. So getting the ability to kill those deer, as Baltune is doing, is just making sure that it means a little bit easier.
And we can see that sneaky little wall on the right side just blocking that TC. If you saw that Baltune wanted to put that TC right on top of the stone, and I don't know if we're just feeling that stone because we want another TC. He does get the wall here, and again, the wood is expensive, but I feel like Rus right now, Scatterbrained's in the driving seat, and Baltune is the one who's going to need to react, and he's going to need to react pretty quickly. Now, with this TC, what do you get? Oh, there's stuff.
Look at these villagers. They're building with fire. How does that even work?
It cooks, Tim. It's quick.
He's cooking? Yeah. There's a little bit of wall shenanigans going on from Baltune just to make sure that he doesn't get that seal off, that Scatterbrained doesn't get that seal off, because both of the boar are on the south side. So being Scatterbrained and getting that horizontal wall just means he has to go all the way around to try to stop these boar. If he wanted to do that, obviously Professional Scouts is going to help him as well. So the second town center does go up. And instead of going for that stone, which this town center is placed precariously, he's going to go for the wood. And he also has the ability to put a mill by those berries to get himself that little bit of food so he doesn't have to worry about farms too quickly. Now, Scatterbrained on the other side with 5 scouts, typical Roos things. I'm going to go up and try to yoink some of these deer. And for the Abbasid Dynasty, making them get to their farms a little bit quicker, taking those deer out of the equation could prove to be beneficial for him in the long run.
Now, the problem I'm seeing right now is with Scatterbrained going for Fast Castle, I feel like he's going to be in the driving seat of aggression, especially having unlimited food. Now, considering that Baltune has both his goals at the top here, if Scatterbrained gets control of that top side, I think Baltune is going to be a little bit stuck in feudal for a while. And as an Abbasid enjoyer, I can definitely say that Abbasid does not want to be stuck in feudal. You do have quite a good choice there with all the wood. You do get the camel race, but you don't want to sit there while Rus is just taking control of the whole map. So I'm excited to see what Scatterbrained is gonna do with all this food, though, because he's getting everything for free, and there's nothing Baltune can do about it. He's getting some spearmen, but they're a little bit late to the party.
You know, that's why something like Pro Scouts is proving to be pretty beneficial and pretty good against something like the Abbasid Dynasty, because before Pro Scouts became the meta and became the choice, the Abbasids were like, yeah, you could do whatever the hell you want out there, and I don't care, because they're going to get town centers and they're going to outboom you anyway. For Scatterbrained and getting this castle as fast as it does, he's going to hit that high trade house button pretty quickly. He's got the resources for it. Hopefully he goes to that corner, because that is going to be a lot. Oh my God, there it is. The amount of gold that he's going to get out of this high trade house is going to blow your mind and absolutely blow your socks off. Okay, Wayman, it's going to be, I don't know. You guys can make guesses in the chat, but I'm thinking it's about, I don't know, 240, something like that. And then the reason why that high trade house is so good is because, especially in a place like this where it's like over 200, maybe 220, 240, something like that, instead of getting Abbey of the Trinity, getting those warrior monks, getting those relics, scooping them up, making this kind of play, making this game out of it, you just get handed to them for free, plus extra deer all the time.
Extra deer is going to be so helpful here, because you're just going to get that bounty constantly ticking, even after drowning in the bounty already. Now, we do see that there's a camel archer coming in between all the normal archers as well. So Baltune definitely feeling comfortable staying in feudal. We can see he's making quite a bit of units here. And if you are making this amount of units, oh, and we see horse archers, Tim, your day is made. You were the chosen one originally, making horse archers from the get-go. These horse archers are going to be quite tough to deal with because of their mobility, but with the archers coming out from Baltune, he's definitely going to be okay with it. We do see more spearmen being queued up, and They're not going to do too well against those bad boys, but you just want to have them in the mix for if you're going to be dealing with those knights that are very common out of Rus.
And, you know, he's using camel archers. He has one in the queue, and that's going to provide a little unease, which is great because, obviously, the horse archers have a decently high base damage. They start at 12, so getting a couple points of that reduced could make a big difference. Now, we're going to wait for that high trade house to go for about a minute, so it ticks up all the way. Then we'll be able to check how much gold per minute it ends up being, and obviously, it depends on the bounty that has previously been completed. But now Baltune, now with that second town center, you're starting to inch out on the map just a little bit. Doesn't necessarily have the technological superiority, obviously, but maybe with that second town center, takes maybe a couple minutes before it fully pays off. He's going to be able to make enough units and get himself up there. But look at these walls, Wayman. He is trying to wall Scatterbrained in. He's like, hey, you want to get to Castle Age? You want to try to get your deer? You got a little bit of deer. Well, now you can have nothing else.
He wants to definitely get control of the deer, so those scouts need to run in very questionable pathways. But the horse archer numbers are starting to be quite scary. And we do see the camel being in the vicinity, so that unease, like you mentioned, is going to be pretty clutch here. All those horses pretty uneasy at the moment. They're trying to fire a spearman, not doing too hot against it. Look at that camel archer just putting the pressure down. Now, 270, Tim. That actually blew my mind. Damn.
That
Wow.
kind of, I got to take a walk after 270. Oh my God. I can't even, I'm just going to, I don't know. I don't think enough blood is going to my brain looking at 270, but taking a look at the Abbasid Dynasty now with about 10, 11 minutes into the game, that town center now starting to pay off. You could have an opportunity to maybe create some sort of foothold around this hill, and it looks like that is what he's doing over the sacred site. So Scatterbrained really wanted to get that sacred site up, really wanted to put him on a timer so that Abbasid TC doesn't pay off, but not going to have the ability to. Not enough horse archers out here yet to really take this fight.
Now, what's actually pretty amazing is the fact that the high trade house is going to make up for quite a bit of the difference in 2TC for a few minutes. So usually we're taught that at 11 minutes, the 2TC starts to pay off and you need to push by then. But when you get a return on value like that high trade house and maybe getting those relics to flow right in, you don't have that 11-minute timer that people are so scared of. You actually get to chill a little bit. I say chill and I look at the resources and I'm like, why are we floating 2,000 resources on Scatterbrain's side? Is he cooking a sneaky imp? No. He gets another upgrade. He's just not sure what he wants to do just yet. He's making sure that he gets it piece by piece. And we see the camel unease doing good work, but he's not fully committed to anything just yet. These horse archers doing some pretty clean work. And usually when you're floating that many resources, you're constantly producing units as well. You just want to make sure that you are making the right move based on the units that you see out of your opponent. Baltune now, though, he's going for the military wing, and he just needs to be allowed to get to castle, because horse archers, they're actually quite well known for being countered by walls. So very good counter unit right there in front of his face.
Yeah, if those horse archers were going to take down that wall, they need a death by about 1,500 paper cuts and actually take it down. So it does end up being a very good repellent for those horse archers. And I think just because of all of the walls that Baltune has, I don't think he's going to have an ability to actually do some damage, do some raiding that he necessarily wants to do. Now, for the Abbasid Dynasty, going up with military wing, he definitely has the ability to continue with his archers and then get composite bows with them, so those archers fire 33% faster, and they can make quick work of horse archers at equal levels just because of how much damage they're able to throw out there. So definitely something that could be viable for Baltune going forward. But if we're taking a look at Scatterbrained, you were talking about something imp related. I think this is a fast imp kind of thing. You know, I mean, there's no reason why to hoard any of those resources. Now, he's adding some men-at-arms to kind of help him in the food department. 286 gold per minute. And the thing of it is, when you're going with horse archers, right, in the beginning, okay, now he just queued a million men-at-arms, so never mind. But when you're going with all of these horse archers, he doesn't need gold right now. He's not getting gold at all. He's getting it from the bounty. He's getting it from the high trade house, and he's getting it from the relics. So right now, he's at about 750 gold per minute with nobody on gold. And I know for the Rus haters in the chat probably think this is absolutely unbelievable, but he extorted the resources that were on the map. Baltune had the ability to try to fight it, and he didn't end up doing enough of a defense. So with this high trade house up now, you have a lot of gold, so what are you going to do? And plus the sacred site. But you have a lot of gold, so what are you going to do with it? You can use a market, you could buy it, you can use the Golden Gate to try to get some good advantage out of it, or you could make some very gold-heavy units. You can make things like men-at-arms that are only a little bit of gold, but they still count. You can make some crossbowmen, you can make some knights even.
Me is he's not using the gold to get any upgrade. I was saying it, and then he got +1 right there, because you know you're dealing with a lot of archers. You know he's gonna most likely go into crossbows as well, because when the archery ranges are there, you might as well. Now, this could have been a Spaskaya tower from Scatterbrained as well, and I honestly think it wouldn't have been the worst choice, because now you're fighting against an Abbasid that is pretty much ahead on eco, but you still are technically a little bit ahead because, again, of that timer that has not paid off fully just yet. And you've gotten all these free resources. We see this Rus Tower being a little bit in danger. That I don't know if the upgrade got cancelled there, but the units are definitely going to be able to provide some pressure over here. The camels are here to provide that and ease for all these horse archers. But these men-at-arms are going down pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think click on a men-at-arms really quickly for me, Vodka, really quickly before all of them go down. No iron undermesh. His rivets are not wedged, ladies and gentlemen. So those men-at-arms went down pretty quickly. Iron undermesh just comes in at a rather unopportune time, so now might be able to do a little bit. But these composite bowmen of the Abbasid can really take down men-at-arms, and they are continuing to. Right under that Rus-sprinkled wooden fortress. And now Baltune is starting to add a little bit of Gulam just to create some firepower. He's going to try to take down these horse archers one at a time, and I think he's going to be largely effective.
Those villagers getting pulled to repair this, they are so expensive to lose, because keep in mind, you are on 1 TC. Every villager you lose is a lot different from Abbasid losing a villager. The men-at-arms are trying their best to do a little bit of damage, but look at the damage from those archers. They are absolutely melting everything. When we see here the siege workshop now coming out, that's going to be a mangonel, and if he gets a juicy shot off, you could still be okay. The mangonel is out, and juicy shot.
Okay. That's a good shot. You need 2 mangonels to 1 tap, so we'll see if he's able to do it. But now that he got hit with that mangonel, he's like, fool me once, you know, shame on you, or whatever, how the saying goes. And the mangonel will have to deal with a staggered formation. And a Castle Age mangonel obviously doesn't have that same area of effect as the Imperial Age mangonel with all the upgrades. But it is enough to make Baltune back up. Now, keep in mind, Baltune was doing all of this under a wooden fortress with a sprinkled upgrade, and without siege superiority, without a siege advantage. So now that he's going to be continuing on 84 villagers to Scatterbrained's 48, he's definitely playing for something like a Sacred Site victory. 6.5 minutes he's got to hold for Scatterbrained to take this game number 1, or the Abbasids are just going to climb their way back in.
Now, with Abbasid being an almost double the villager count, you have to ask yourself, will they have enough firepower? And I feel like the answer is yes. We can see with the amount of resources that Baltune has in his pocket, he's getting ready to fight the siege battle as well. The horse archers, while cool, they're really, really struggling to get the same amount of damage done here. And you can see these scouts are doing their best at just stopping the walls too, but the archers with the composite bows are at the ready. And now the units are just not able to break through this wood wall that is stopping everything from being so easy. The horse archers are here though, and those 5 archers are not going to be able to shut them down. Although, let's see, they do beat the wall though. Very nice.
Uh-oh. This might be what Scatterbrained needed to buy himself a little bit of time. A lot of those archers will obviously go down, and Baltune, instead of pushing up to try to decap that Sacred Site, needs to take a battle with these horse archers. A lot of these, you got some crossbowmen in there as well. I was hoping, for Scatterbrained's sake, he was able to do a little bit more economic damage, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Now, on the back end, you can see the economies and the differences between them. Obviously, Baltune is going very heavy into wood because he wants a lot of siege. Scatterbrained going into, again, a decent amount of food to try to get his men-at-arms going. He kind of stopped in terms of military production. Now he's starting to queue a little bit. But in our 2nd series in a row, Whammon, we now have Springalds again.
we are just missing the point of spring arts in our games, and we just don't understand what is happening. Oh, 302 gold. Beautiful. That bounty just increasing. That is just free, free, free all the time. Plus 5 relics. Honestly, I don't think he ever needs to touch gold again in his life. And this army is not big enough to actually deal with what Scatterbrained has. We now have double Springald production, still not making enough sense, but with the amount of melee units he's expecting, I guess it makes sense. It's just, you know, that's a lot of archers, and we saw what archers could do to Springalds.
Yeah, we definitely did. Let's see if those composite bows have something to say about it. But the mangonels are coming in. Maybe you want to unpack and try to get a job going because you got some archers to take down. A couple of them end up going down on the back line. Baltune trying to get into a couple different pockets of archers, kind of scatter them a little bit. But Baltune, I mean, we're running into something that we kind of saw and we kind of foretold earlier in this one. He spent a lot of time in his base trying to get the economic advantage, and it is not materializing into anything right now, Wayman.
The problem is he's engaging losing units at a point where he needs to be macroing up and getting that huge mass to do that push. Now with all these small pushes, he's just lost an irreparable amount of them. And we can see now with the trebuchet joining the party, he's taken a few notes from the previous games and he's like, buildings are counted by trebuchets. But the problem is, usually you need a few land units to deal with the rest on the field as well. Now, Baltune, even though he had this huge, huge lead, Scatterbrained delayed the game enough to put him under pressure, and now he feels like he needs to do this. And with that amount of units, it just doesn't look like he's going to be able to.
No, I mean, the Abbasid definitely have some military, buffs that we talked about with the composite bows and all that kind of stuff. But with how many men-at-arms that are here, doesn't really make much of a difference. Baltune says, I am done. Let me just move on to game number 2. Scatterbrained with the Roos in very predictable fashion on King of the Hill, taking down this one. You could take a look at the villager count by this graph, and I get it. It looks very low for Scatterbrained, but you got to remember, he was getting, plus those 5 relics, sacred sites, high trade houses, all those hunting cabins trickling in. He had about 1,000 gold per minute and didn't need a villager to do it. It's almost like having a dock for gold. So very quickly, if we can go to resources gathered, vodka, thank you very much. You can see the Scatterbrained with 40 less villagers at the end of the game ended up gathering more resources. As a result, a lot of that being that passive income. So Scatterbrained knew how Roos works and exploited it to a game 1 victory on King of the Hill. Masterful.
And honestly, I think this was the match he needed. Like we said earlier, Baltune just has a lot more experience in tournaments in general. So with Scatterbrained on this map had to be his map. And honestly, it looks like he came prepared. And Scatterbrained doing an amazing job at showing us that he's not someone to be discounted. Next one is going to be something a little bit more standard on Dry Arabia, which this is now a map, as I mentioned earlier, Baltune liking standard because he's played this many times. So Baltune choosing Dry Arabia with HRE on the cards. Now, as an HRE enjoyer, I wish Malians the best of luck because HRE has the ability to keep up with what most civilizations struggle against Malians. HRE has the ability, if you're dealing with Malians, a lot of people would be able to go fast castle and get the relics or go to TC and try to match the economy. But the whole point is you can do 1 TC all in even and still come out ahead because you have that boost in economy. HRE just feels like it has a few answers, and I am not good enough to know which ones are best, but I'm sure I'm going to take out my little notebook and say exactly what it is going to be. So, Malians on Scatterbrained. I think Malians, again, a civilization with a lot of potential. The moment you give them a chance, they snowball. And Tim, I think you mentioned something about packing snow as Malians, right? You'd make a cow and the cow produces... Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought this very important topic to the conversation in this EGC cast. We're going to talk about packing the snow here for the Malians, okay? Everybody buckle up. So, obviously, with the Malians, there are a couple civilizations that do this very well. We have 3.5 minutes. Oh my god, so many people are going to click off. We've got you got with the Malians. Obviously, they have their pit mines to create a little bit of that passive income, but it's all about getting that economy going. It's all about packing that snow going into feudal age with the cow boom, with the pit mines to make sure you get a good snowball. You're able to continuously produce units. And then all of a sudden, Whammon, that snowball that you made with all of those units turns into an avalanche, just an absolute onslaught of Zerg-like units from the Malian Empire that's going to be difficult and devastating for any civilization to deal with. But you're absolutely right about the HRE. Thank you very much for the snowball talk. I'm glad you really helped me transition into that one. So for the HRE, going into feudal age, and I mean, don't get me wrong, the Malians, they have their cow boom, they get their pit mines, they do all that kind of stuff. That's all good and grand. But the HRE just builds a landmark.
Mm-hmm.
In feudal, they just build the Achen Chapel, so all of those villagers are inspired. The prelate gets his megaphone in that chapel. If you did not know, within a 6-tile radius, you are able to shout your thoughts and prayers to all of those villagers, and they work so much faster. So their economy kind of takes off a little bit quicker. Does that transition into some kind of feudal age stuff? Obviously, HRE have the ability to make things like men-at-arms. Mali can make Musafati, so that's an option. But your wood economy ends up being pretty good as the HRE, especially early because of that inspiration. So you can make a lot of things like archers. You can, I mean, for HRE, I still feel like this in the beginning of the season. Plus, they could benefit from pro scouts as well. It just kind of feels like the world is their oyster. I mean, they could even pro scout like by the town center so the Achen Chapel gets inspired. So think about that. Pro scouts, deer at home, you can't touch them with survival techniques, right? And inspired.
You mentioned HRE being able to go for this, but Malians also has that ability, especially with their scouts being kind of spicy. So for those of you who are also spicy scout enjoyers, you know that Malians, when they do get that scout mass up, they make that wood line a little bit less safe as the HRE. So I think the spawn is also going to determine exactly how these players react, because you can go for those spicy scouts that are professional as well. They can carry these carcasses back home, but at the same time, destroy the scouts of your opponent who is trying to do the same. So spicy or warrior, whatever you want to call those bad boys, they are definitely not something to be messed with. And I feel like that's now something Malians has unlocked as well. Because we've seen a lot of Malians just stay in feudal and keep eating the food that is brought to them and overwhelm even without a cow boom. A cow boom is just extra. But with the amount of units you can produce with Malians, it could be pretty much okay. I do believe, though, HRE decides what the game is going to look like. If they are the ones who try to go for some scout shenanigans, then Malians is going to be able to react. But if they go for fast castle, again, Malians needs to have that timing just right. So yeah, I think HRE is just, they're in the driving seat, and Malian needs to buckle up and just respond accurately. So guys, we are about to go in. We are 5 seconds away from this destruction that I need to watch so I can stop losing ranked games and get back to Conqueror. So let's roll on in.
What an absolutely wonderful transition timing going in game 2. There were snowballs, there were scouts, there were Achen Chapels and prayers and whatnot coming into that 5 minutes. But now, game number 2 is on your screen. Scatterbrained playing as the Malians in the color blue, spawning south portion of the map. Baltune playing as the Holy Roman Empire in the color red, spawning in the north. Malian going for their pit mine and their houses, as we very much enjoy. But take a look at what Baltune's doing, getting a little spicy in Dark Age and going with some Spearman Whammon. I saw this at a pretty decent amount for team games. I saw HRE going for and getting some kind of, Dark Age shenanigans to get whatever teammate that's a night civilization underway. But in a 1v1 against the Malians, it might prove to be beneficial. They want to spend their wood on houses and all that kind of stuff to age up. They don't necessarily want a production building. The problem is, Whammon, take a look at where that gold spawn is for Scatterbrained. This is a nicely tucked away gold that's going to be difficult for you to actually get to.
And I love the fact that Scatterbrained only built those 2 houses, and he was like, okay, responsible housing. These are probably gonna get burnt. And It just feels like he knew this was cooking because this is a very common response from HRE to make. A lot of HRE players are going for that Dark Age Spearman pressure, and this guy's just thinking about his choices before he moves along. So that man is about to run into some houses, but at the same time, Baltune is now going to be focused on his economy. I was about to say on his economy here, but is he going to make another Spearman? He's still on the wood. He needs that little bit to make a mining camp and go for the gold. But because you are playing HRA, your villagers are inspired, they're living their best life, and they're going to be able to age up at pretty much the same time. With these villagers moving out here, I'm wondering what the plan is here for Mr. Scatterbrained. A little bit of idle time, and we're getting a Sahara trade network. I don't think we've seen one of those in the last few centuries. Brilliant.
Yeah, this one is pretty interesting. I know the Malians used to do this a lot when the Farimba was super popular, right? And people would FC Farimba and destroy other people. But the Saharan trade network kind of fell out of favor. A lot of people went with the Mansa Quarry just to get that little bit of extra gold production, help propel them to try to get a lot of cows, to get that extra gold, to try to get some cows. But Heron Trade Network is going to help protect that pit mine, which is nice. It's a 5,000 hit point outpost, much like the Kremlin and the Barbican. However, you also have the ability to use it as a toll outpost like the Malians do. Now, if you could see, I don't know if the Malians necessarily want to do this, if Scatterbrained wants to do this, but you have a trading post on the western side of the map, western corner. You have another trading post on the eastern corner. So is Malian going to go a little bit off the script and try to go for something like trade? And I think if you're in a matchup that you necessarily don't appreciate and don't like, maybe you try something a little outlandish to try to get an upper hand.
Well, what Baltune already did is he got himself an upper hand by idling that TC by just destroying a house. So now we'll see what this looks like soon, because Baltune is cooking a lot of food, though. I don't know what he's planning on doing with those. I guess he could just make a ton more spearmen or go to Fast Castle from here. But the age up timing is about to be clicked through. A little bit delayed. I mean, most of us would call this quite a late castle, but we'll see now what the plan is here, if this is just going to be feudal all in. Especially against the Sahara Trade Network, it becomes a lot harder to actually do. So you do need to invest a little bit more to actually get some damage done. But thinking about that second gold, Malians is not going to have a chance at grabbing that.
Yeah, and you can see Baltune put his spearman there, so you're going to be able to find it, right? So if he does go for that secondary pit mine, and because we're on the map that we are, because we're on Dry Arabia, everything is pretty spread out, kind of randomly, right? So if he goes for another gold, there's another one that's over there on the southeastern tip, I want to say, where that gold mine is. So those spearmen are going to be able to find it. So he puts the Akkad Chapel, as Vodka is showing us there. Fantastic. Now, because the Akkad Chapel is right next to the wood line and it's going to create a lumber camp, save himself a little bit of tempo, save himself a little bit of wood, there probably is some feudal age stuff that's going to happen. Now it depends on what he necessarily wants to go towards, because when you're being aggressive against the Malians, as you know, Whammon, from being a Malians player yourself, the villagers end up being not as important as the buildings they can make.
The villagers, though, they are moving forward. And my question is, where are they going? Are they going straight towards the deer pack there at the front? Do they want to build something? Are they tower rushing the player? No, they're just going to get some deer. Now, unfortunately, the deer does get spread quite a bit, and then this is going to be quite a bit of lapping here for Baltune, but he does get that spearman upgrade and instantly gets double broadaxe. Now, we do see survival techniques coming out for Mr. Scatterbrained, and this is going to mean we're going to get some scout shenanigans, and this is exactly what I meant earlier. Now, you've invested getting that mill in the middle of the map. But now you're going to be playing against scouts. Those scouts are actually going to be able to do damage against you, trying to be out all the way out there on the map. So these scouts are going to be quite spicy to handle. And let's see if he's going to be able to get enough food to stay ahead. We see that next scout coming in, and he's just going to be picking up some very, very heavy deer. Enough gold, they say. Let's pull back.
Yeah, I mean, Baltune Spearmen are trying to do the best he can. Scatterbrain's trying to go for a little bit of a yoink strategy to try to take some of those deer that Baltune is already starting to gather. But now that Scatterbrain does have another scout, he's going to be able to get warrior scouts, which is going to get completed just about right now. if he didn't have those spearmen, they definitely would have been yoinkable. Like 100% of the time, they would have been yoinkable just because of that warrior scout doing damage. Baltune back home, and this is the very crazy thing about HRE, is while you're making units and he's continuing to pump out units and the like, he's obviously continuing to get food and wood. He's going to be able to farm and make a little bit of farms around his Aachen Chapel while producing units. So as you can see, Baltune's got a military count of 11. I get that one of them is the prelate, but Scatterbrained went into professional scouts, got some warrior scouts, but at the same time, he doesn't really have much in the way of a transition. So we're not seeing cows, we're not seeing any of that kind of stuff. We're going to see pro scouts, and we're going to see some feudal age.
Double broadaxe coming out here from Scatterbrained means that he is going to commit to this feudal, and he's actually going to stick to it. Because I was thinking here for a second, what could you realistically do against this if you're about to, play against the HRE feudal push, which is so powerful? Now, you obviously do have that Sahara trade network, which protects you quite a bit. But you don't want to fight the HRE straight up when you just have the normal quarry. So this is going to be making it a little bit more viable to just sit in your base and take the fight, produce units. So we'll see if Scatterbrained does this enough, but we see another warrior scout coming out. Now, guys, keep in mind, with that amount of warrior scouts, we're going to be getting a lot of pressure on this map. You'll be able to run right into the wood line if Baltune is not scary. Oh, is not careful. Not scary. Oh my goodness, the English has disappeared. And Baltune is careful. He says, I believe in walls, Tim. Take a look at that thing. That thing is going to help you. It is not a foe, it is a friend.
I hate it. On the western and eastern side, obviously it is going to provide some defense, which is going to be beneficial. Warrior scouts definitely have the ability to raid and become raiding potential, so being able to wall that is obviously going to help. Baltune realizes that he probably is ahead in this economic count, so he's trying to put some damage on. Now for Scatterbrained, this military production, his archery ranges, his stables, they're all forward. Okay, maybe he was looking for some kind of, if he wanted to do a cow boom later, it would go in the back. So he puts his production a little bit up front. Going to be going with javelin throwers. And obviously against this army, the spearmen aren't going to do too much in terms of damage. But hopefully with those javelin throwers, it repels that HRE archer force.
Now, they instantly push this back, and a villager does get pulled, but this will mean that the upgrade is most likely going to make it through. So Baltune's response by just getting javelin Baltune. Scatterbrain's response by getting these javelin throwers already puts that level of pressure up. Even though the archer numbers are that massive, it's just going to force you to deal with these that trade inefficiently. Now, you can see that villager is desperately trying to protect that blacksmith, and it will go down. Ooh, it will not go down. The villagers get pulled again. It survives, and +1 makes it through. The calls have all been wrong. The names, and the blacksmith survives another day.
Absolutely wild. Trying to get that blacksmith up is crazy. Now, with that archer range, he does have the javelin throwers with iron undermesh. So hopefully, with the amount of ranged armor that they have, they will be able to repel that archer mess. Baltune kind of notices that there really isn't, a way to be aggressive against this Malian player. He's getting pro scouts, he's getting deer, you can't really raid that. Woodline, you can't really raid. The gold, you can't really raid because of the Saharan trade network. And obviously all the defensive units that Scatterbrained is making with the javelin throwers and the archers. So he's looking to bypass that entirely. And he's going to be going with the Regnitz Cathedral. Hopefully he's able to sneak some prelates out there to get to an area where he can grab 1 or 2 relics, because the Malian army, with what he has, those javelin throwers, those archers, they're kind of slow. So if you're in multiple areas, you're trying to get multiple relics at the same time, it could prove to be beneficial. Now, the relic spawn for Baltune isn't the best. You can see that he doesn't have that prototypical, one safe relic, so he's got to be going out to get it. Warrior scouts on the northern side trying to create some raid potential, but there are some relics that he's trying to get. It looks like he's trying to go for more the farther ones than anything else, just to kind of give himself that extra eco that the Malians would have if they're doing things like pit mines and the like. So Baltune's trying to even the score and make it more in his favor.
Problem is, those scouts were going to be so pivotal in actually stopping these relics. So these relics are going to be a little bit more free to pick up. Now, he does have a pretty sizable army that can move out on those and stop one of them. And we see a blue blob moving forward. But it doesn't mean that there's going to be enough pressure to stop these relics. That tower, not that great against javelin throwers, but with the archers in the mix, he can quickly target fire those and do a good bit of damage. That prelate on the left side, though, seems to have returned without a relic. This might be one of those shift-click things where you accidentally clicked it in feudal, and the man is running back empty-handed.
Yeah, hopefully he does find a religious artifact and his precious to try to take over at some point. Now, these far relics are definitely ones that he's going for. It's kind of interesting because Scatterbrained had the presence of mind to be like, hey, he's probably going to get those safe relics to make sure these cathedral, the relics that go in the outposts and the like, are going to be able to pay off as quickly as possible. But Baltune's not really doing that. You know, he's trying to get some of these far ones, trying to make it a little bit unsafe for him, a little bit of Wololo coming down on the southern side. Those warrior scouts got to back up, but he does have a prelate on the eastern side. He had an eastern far relic that's got scooped up, and then the far eastern one he has taken as well. So 2 for Baltune currently, and has a couple that are relatively close to his cathedral to take. So overall, as far as the relics go, I like what Baltune's doing. And it's interesting for the HRE, just because I know you're the HRE player. Once you kind of turtle a little bit, you get to castle, you get those relics, and then you just turtle back in, and you're like, okay, that's all I wanted. You guys can go about your business.
Yeah, then you wait for the Malian power spike, and I honestly don't know if Baltune is aware that this is a Farimba. The fact that we are now seeing a Farimba, for most of you, you haven't seen a Farimba in competitive play in a while. So the Farimba here is going to be very unexpected, because Farimba, they make a unit that is so good against ranged units, especially when you know your opponent is going for a lot of those. So we'll see what the Farimba holds and what the unit of choice is here. But for all Baltune knows, he thinks that this is a cow boom. So knowing Baltune, he's probably scouted, but this is still a very uncertain situation for him, and he's about to get a surprise when these bad boys arrive, being fully decked out.
Yeah, and take a look. I mean, this is I think it went for the Mansa Javelineer. So if you can click on that for me, Vodka, we can kind of hover over what they're going to be doing, even just one of the units. I would prefer. So taking a look at that one, it does have a decent amount of damage. It has 10 base damage. Obviously, he has 1 because of Steeled Arrow. But one of the most important things about it is that it is poisonous. It has a little bit of poison on it. So if the HRE starts to go into some of those heavy units, those men-at-arms and like, obviously Musafati could be valuable. But getting that poison on it with that high base damage is pretty important as well. So hopefully he's going to be able to continue to tune those out and try to get Baltune and do some damage in Castle Age, because before you know it, you get some of these relics. He's got 2 relics already. He's going to be able to get that third one because of how close it is, I would imagine. And once he gets that, there's kind of no stopping him to get the Swabia.
Yeah, Baltune getting the Swabia would definitely be a really strong way for him to live another day. Because right now, I feel like Scatterbrained is in charge. He's with those Javelineers, or I don't know how to pronounce that, but they are going to make it a little bit harder to survive. They are going to be able to deal with those units you usually can't handle, like men-at-arms, just because they'll be able to poison them. And that's most likely going to be the cause of death here for Baltune. Poisoning by javelins. And another prelate pays the price, runs right into the javelin sneaky little hole they've got here, and Scatterbrained is actually ready to go pick up a few of those relics himself. 1 getting in the bank, and now the next 2 will follow suit if Baltune is not careful and doesn't provide a little bit of support for those prelates trying to get... Oh, another one goes down to poison. Disgusting.
And rather theatrically, I think he drank a little hemlock before going down like that. Shout out to Socrates, who died that way. So with that next relic in play, obviously for the Malians, you getting those relics is so important, because what's the best way to defend relics from going to your opponent? It's taking them yourself. So just if you're able to do that, obviously he's got 2 relics. That third one he actually did pick up. You can see it on the western side. And I know we're just talking about religious artifacts for the duration of this game, but there's a reason why. I mean, Regnitz Cathedral, getting at least 3 relics is very important. And now with these Mansa Javelineers, with those 3 relics, they'll have a decent amount of food and gold. He's going to continue to pump them out and will be doing so. And kiting cutting some of those spearmen out who don't really have that ranged armor. And with the poison, we'll be going down rather quickly. So these Manta Javelineers actually have a pretty decent fight against a lot of these melee troops. If they're able to get a little bit of a front line, maybe, you know, some Sofas or Donzos or Musafati, what have you, as long as they have something, they might be able to stand back and be that DPS unit that you want them to be.
The problem with HRE is they have that extra bit of movement speed they get for free. So they can chase down these javelin throwers quite well. And the kiting is a little bit inefficient, but at the same time, there's so many of them. They're still coming out ahead. That sheep, honestly, the MVP of this game. It's standing there in the wood line, providing vision to all those archers, and it definitely has done its work. Now, let's see if he's going to reposition that bad boy to get a few more down. But now, Scatterbrained, he is a little bit in the lead here. We can see 57 now, and basically the relic count is going to be quite even, considering now HRE does get double the value, but you're going to be on 3 relics as Scatterbrained. So it's not going to be that much of an edge. Now the question is Baltune going to be able to do something with HRE? Or is he going to now sit in his base and wait for that Imperial to get the Swabia and just get further ahead? Him getting a keep here is so critical in securing that gold and getting into the late game, because that keep doesn't just secure the gold, it also secures that wood line. Oh, look at that sheep. That's
unbelievable. That sheep really is the MVP. That's actually wild. The fact that sheep is able to do that. I think they got that sheep from the Coca Township, actually. That's the Shinobi sheep in my eyes. But getting this for HRE, obviously, you got those relics. You have a decent amount of gold. You're continuing to get them, which are great. But you got to know HRE, and you know this, Wayman. HRE is pretty much a defensive civilization. Right? I mean, they put their relics in the keeps and the outposts to have those super strong defensive areas and emergency repair as well. I don't see much of a reason why you wouldn't end up hanging out by your base, getting Swabia. And Baltune, it looks like he's doing exactly that, adding some stone walls up in here.
And with the amount of gold he's floating, he's not far off of Imperial. And I want you guys to notice, Scatterbrained here, he only queued up those Musafatis right now. It took him a while to make that decision. And it's most likely him now getting the wheelbarrow, he's getting the +2 range defense, just making sure that he is prepared for anything, because he doesn't have any information on what Baltune is going for right now. And I'm sure everybody here on ladder has been like, oh, what is the HRE doing? Oh, imp. And then you're like, oh, damn, ticking time bomb. That Swabia is going to do something pretty soon. But Scatterbrained, 7 vills ahead. He's slowly doing a little bit of a cow boom, I saw in the base as well, just to make sure that he gets a little bit ahead, a little bit of free food going into the later game. Because we can see these villagers, they are a bunch of hungry boys. And they're running around with the berry baskets, desperately hoping their lives will be spared.
Yeah, they tried to pick some pomegranates, but they might end up dying with their baskets, at least a couple of them. And just creating that idle time is obviously important. Now, Baltune does hit that Swabia button while Javelineers are just running around trying to find stuff to take down. Very important that you described for the infantry and their increased speed. Because for the HRE, I think people kind of undersell this a little bit because it got nerfed once. You can't have it. You don't have it in Dark Age anymore. You get it in Feudal. But being able to dictate when to take a fight and when to retreat is pretty insane. And for HRE having the ability to do that just means there's so many units that he made that end up staying alive because they were able to outrun those Javelineers. So he's going to be able to have enough units to be defensive, because for HRE, this is a weak point. Once you get Swabia, obviously it takes a little bit of time, a few minutes to pay off, and then you start making your military units. But if you're the Malians, this might be the time to be like, hey, he's so focused on his eco, maybe I just dive right in.
Question is, can he dive in with that keep at the front line? Now he needs to ask himself, where do I go? And I mean, the obvious way to go is around the chapel by the right side. You sneak right in there, ignore the keep, and do as much economic damage as possible, because this is the only chance you've got. So that wood line there at the back is going to be your main spot. And we see that Baltune knows this. He's like, hey, I'm making a wall here. I'm making another wall here, and I'm going to be safe. You have to go through that keep. So Baltune definitely wants this to last a little bit longer, just so that economy lead can kick in. But we can see here from Scatterbrained, he is only getting 900 food per minute. So Is he gonna? Yes. I thought he was almost just A-moving. And these boys are gonna clean up a few of these units. Those Javelineers are chonking the men-at-arms. Men-at-arms look like they're made of paper and just dying from the poison as they're desperately running away.
Yeah, and that's, that poison really feels good, I would imagine, as a Malian player. You're watching a unit that probably would have gotten away, and then it just ends up dying as it starts retreating. You really love that. But Baltune continuing to go with that defensive strategy with the Swabia. Obviously, the eco is going to be there. And because he can emergency repair some of these outposts, make sure that you're able to emergency repair before you again end up with them going down, because you have that bombard emplacement coming in. And as soon as that comes in, if he targets some of those Mansa Javelineers, that can be a devastating problem for him. It looks like there's in 2 different areas. Let's see when that bombard emplacement comes in. Maybe those Javelineers are running in the opposite direction. All of a sudden, they got to start backing up. Now, against arrow fire, they do pretty good, right? Against an actual cannon, not so much. Right? So you're going to need a little bit in order to do that. But economic count continuing to be high for Baltune, but Scatterbrained wants to end this game before stuff come out, right? So he's putting those siege workshops up front. He's going to be trying to take down some of these defensive structures because he doesn't want this game to go any longer. He's even got the sacred sites to try to put him on the clock.
The best part is he's getting a trebuchet. We've seen every single pro player go for springles, mangonels, but people are dead set on not getting that damn trebuchet. And the trebuchet is here, and it's the only thing that'll deal with that keep. There's nothing you can do against an HRE keep unless you get a damn trebuchet. And this man knows it. He's made a note of it. He's like, hey, let me get that trebuchet. I'm going to be able to take this. Because Baltune does not have an army that can handle what is surrounding your trebuchet. So that trebuchet, another one in queue, and another beautiful siege workshop coming in hard. Scatterbrained making a keep of his own in the base of HRE, and emergency repairs coming out pretty early on so that they can be reactivated in a few moments as well without losing too much time. Baltune knows this is it. He's going to need to defend this because it's coming. And these Javelineers, they're going to get some pretty good damage. Ooh, get that relic, Tim? How do you kill that?
You put that relic in a keep, all of a sudden it could shoot bombards from another dimension. And, this is just kind of illustrating the fact of HRE being a more defensive civilization. So obviously they're going to make a lot of these things like keeps. They're going to put relics in them and all that kind of stuff that you need siege to deal with. And that emergency repair, I mean, you need a decent amount of trebs to fight through that, don't get me wrong. But that emergency repair, it just feels like a middle finger. Like you're trying to take down this keep. You've put so many trebuchets on it. Maybe he's going to get a little bit of repair also. But then all of a sudden, emergency repairs becomes available, and it's like, good luck, bud.
That keep's plan is not to stay alive forever. It's just to ensure that those military units are there too. And he survives until the next emergency repair. It gets clicked, and now 4 trebuchets are basically going to be stuck there for a while. But 65 Musafadi warriors, I don't know. I'm not much of a Musafadier because I lose them. But those bad boys are going to be shredding through anything. And look at Baltune. Even though he knows he's in danger, he's trying to do a little bit of aggression as well. Because he knows if he just sits in his base, he's like a sitting goose. Or what does that say? A sitting goose? Sitting duck?
Sitting duck.
A sitting duck. Same thing.
He is whatever bird that you want to talk about sitting on a pond, that's exactly what he's going to be. Now, I think he's got enough trebuchets, hopefully, to fight through that emergency repairs. So hopefully he has the ability to. But remember, all of his units are still of the Castle Age variety. So Baltune does have Elite Spearmen. He's adding some crossbowmen as well. He really didn't want to use men-at-arms just because of all the Musafadi that are there. It's very tricky for the HRE because then it's like, what do you really want to do? I mean, with these javelins, I could see something like Landsknecht could be an option, but the amount of spearmen, I don't think they're going to be that damage dealer that you need.
Now, the spearman that he's making, I think is just the pure desperation of, and the relic goes down because they're so cost efficient against an army that wants to dive you. But now, they dive you and there's no keep to fire back. There's no bombard emplacement. There's a relic that's missing, and that could be a yoink. And we know how we feel about a good yoink. The siege workshop being placed at the front here, Marlians does not care about your units. He's just going to be able to target fire these as he wants. Now with these javelins, they do need to split up that fire. Otherwise, they are going to overkill on a lot of these. But with Baltune's army, we see that quickly disappearing. And with Springholds at the ready as well, they're just going to destroy anything that tries to come onto the backline. Palace of Swabia now getting emergency repaired. And Baltune, I think he's scared here because this means that Scatterbrained is 2-0 up, and this map was his choice.
Yeah, we're gonna see if Baltune's able to continue this hold. Now, remember, he's not out of it yet, you know, with the Swabia. But Fort of the Huntress and pulling 32 villagers to do it, that is a massive get out of my game key and a get out of my game landmark. So that's what he's going to be attempting to do. He's got Springholds in the back for all the infantry. The Spearmen actually proved to be pretty decent fodder because they're not getting that extra damage that's hit from a javelin thrower or from an archer or the like, but Baltune does not have the ability to stop this from going up. He didn't have any siege through that battle. He didn't have mangonels to help with the javelin throwers, and now he doesn't have any kind of siege to kind of repel this Fort of the Huntress, so it will go up without a concern. And military count for Baltune, he's sitting on about 10, continuously feeding into those javelin throwers. So is this going to be a time for Baltune to start to get his feet out from under him and start to make a bunch of military? Because if he doesn't, he's got 4 minutes, and this game's over regardless.
Now, Tim, I don't know if you're playing Age of Mythology right now, because that's the only place where some miracle like that could happen. Because poor Baltune, he's probably the poorest Swedish man out there right now. He's got nothing. He's got 9 spearmen in the queue, he's got a culverin, and a dream. And that is it. Baltune is holding on. He's thinking about that next game, exactly what he's going to be picking, because losing on HRE is such a massive destruction to face, because you know now one of your strongest picks are out, and trebuchets are about to landmark eliminate you. So that's definitely going to be a little bit demotivating thinking about what's waiting next. And now with all those upgrades for Scatterbrained, you see the Javelineers, just more of them being made. Baltune just holding on to a dream. Culverin trying his best to survive, but he's going to go down too.
And that's why sometimes the best defense is a good offense, because you're talking about, you know, the Sacred Site's producing a timer. That's another landmark that ends up going down. Home TC gone. No emergency repairs now because there's no town center. There's only one culverin trying to keep him afloat. But the thing of it is, even if Baltune ended up repelling all of this, say he took down the Fort of the Huntress, he took down everything, he would still need to lick his wounds to get the army to actually go get a Sacred Site. So Baltune is so focused on his base and making sure he stays alive, the Sacred Sites aren't even a thing that he's thinking about. And before you know it, 2.5 minutes is gone. Baltune is gone into game number 2. Scatterbrained taking that one and taking a commanding lead in this series. He's going to be on match point.
The sitting goose doesn't make it out. He's not going to fly into victory. The poor man, he needs to come back from this, because this is match point. And Scatterbrained is going into this final game with a very big smile on his face. So Marlians just showing a little bit more diversity than we've seen in most pro play. And the Warrior Scouts reigning supreme with that unlimited food source in the base. So, Baltune, I would honestly say this is one of the biggest upsets that we've seen today, because Baltune is a player who's shown consistency against the top players at the moment. But if thinking about Baltune as a person, I think that this is definitely weighing on him. And I can imagine that a loss like this, especially, is going to factor into the next game. And I think that is exactly what experience brings you. To understand, can I get out of this? You see that military count equal until it wasn't. The Javelineers, a pretty good surprise, just was a little bit too much. So let's see if Baltune can keep his head straight and actually make it out of here alive. Baltune, who you can see here with the graph, Scatterbrained just slowly getting ahead with those units that he had, all those relics as well. He just put up a pretty good show.
Yeah, I think for Scatterbrain, just doing something a little bit different and not of the norm ended up being relatively in favor for him. So he went with the Saharan Trade Network, which doesn't show in this replay, but it's a little bit south of the camera right now, making sure that if Baltune was going to go something in the feudal age variety, he was going to have a big outpost to kind of help him out in that regard. So Baltune, instead of going for the pit mine and something that's really important to go get, he took down or attempted to take down the blacksmith, which stayed on 10 health and continued to get repaired. So he kind of made a little bit of a switch because now he's like, well, I got to take it into castle and I got to go into, Regnan's Cathedral, a bunch of prelates and relics, just like the old days. But Scatterbrain did a good job of defending those relics, and Baltune only got 2. He was able to stick around. The professional scouts really helped him to keep up in the terms of military production, and Baltune continued to be on the back foot even as Swabia was generated. So Scatterbrain, with very good presence of mind, trying to find that HRE weak point and getting in there and taking him down. But there is no absolute way that I would be
Mhm.
counting out the tuna right now. So there is definitely a potential to reverse sweep this one and go to 3-2, but Scatterbrain obviously has the advantage. So let's take a look and see what's been going on around the rest of the league as we take a look at this bracket. Mahodo and Lash will be starting their round of 8. Avely and Corvinus will be going into their round of 8 match. Avely taking down Cat 2-0. Mio Micah has a 2-0 lead on Starflark right now. He's on match point to get to his main event qualification. So this has been an absolute crazy day full of so many different shakeups, so many different matches that I didn't really expect to happen. Not saying they weren't possible, but maybe implausible. And some of these players really showed up. People like Starflark in the round of 8. People like Avely getting through Cat. You have somebody like Mahodo going through Voldemort. You could just pick a part of the bracket and something happened that you might not have expected.
Honestly, this is just showing us exactly what Age of Empires has in store for us. All these players that have fallen out, a lot of these players were considered to be top 16. And this is just showing us there is talent rising. And this is going to be amazing for esports going forward. Now, I do not count out Mr. Tuna. I'm a big fan of Mr. Tuna. Baltune, he knows how to navigate a water map. It's in the name. And getting AUBIDs on Lakeside. We saw a little bit of Lakeside earlier. Now, as a person who hasn't played on Lakeside in my life, Tim has inspired us to understand exactly that one deep water fish can mean a lot. But we saw what could happen even if you lose water. Anything is possible, but with Ottomans as the pick, we've seen a lot of hate towards the Ottomans, not doing too well in pro play right now. Tim, how do you feel about the Ottoman choice here?
Well, I don't like it. I don't really like Ottomans in general. I feel like they're just, I don't know. They feel to me in terms of economy they don't really match up with other civilizations. I mean, I get the idea with the military schools because instead of getting extra resources, you just get units and you kind of cut out the middleman in terms of getting those resources. But I don't know if they end up being, just because you're getting the units and you're not getting the resources, you don't have the flexibility, right? So maybe it's a little bit different for the Ottomans. There was somebody that I played a lot in like season 6, season 7, and then I just kind of stopped because it felt like every single time I matched up against any civilization, I felt like I was battling uphill, and I would rather not do that. So with this one on Lakeside with the Ayubids, we saw Corvinus in the feudal age go with Culture Wing, getting that one as quickly as humanly possible, and also Tuna has the advantage, obviously, against the Ottomans. Maybe he has a potential to take water first, and that water being so important with that one ship. It's funny because I was watching. I see Puppy Paw in chat. How you doing, brother? I saw a Puppy Paw stream where he was doing custom games and playing on Lakeside, and he saw that one deep water fish, and he's like, "Yeah, that's what matters." He's like, "It's the fish. You get the fish, and that's it." So, and he did, and then he won. So I think it's about getting the fish. Thanks, Puppy Paw, for that little bit of analysis.
Now, Baltuna is going to have to live up to his name because he's going to need the fish. And honestly, I'm trying to imagine what Ottomans would look like on water, because I think a lot of us. Oh, there goes my camera. Sorry, guys. I have no idea why it just died, but I will be right back. So, the problem, what we're going to be seeing here with these two, is we need to make sure that these guys are able to play to the strengths of their civs. And I feel like with Ottomans, you definitely have that timing that goes really quickly, and all of a sudden Ottomans just has this massive amount of units. So I'm a little bit worried here for the man to see if he is going to be able to come out ahead if Baltune is not aggressive enough. I think Ottomans does have a chance. So we'll see if that's going to be the case today. In the meantime, I don't know. I feel like Four Lakes, definitely more of a map that Baltune will have an edge over because he's played it so many times as well. So if he can make it out of Lakeside, I think he still has a pretty good shot.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting the Iobids to be his Four Lakes choice, honestly, just because of the half-price docks, right? For the Iobids, you pretty much only need one. But getting to that culture wing, you know, if he does choose to do that in Feudal Age, could prove to be a good benefit, a very civ-specific benefit. So could definitely play the role here, but taking a look at what Scatterbrained has left over, you know, him using the Ottomans could be just a throwaway, right? If he actually, I mean, he had the draft and he picked it, so maybe he just uses it, ends up throwing this game away. And then on the backside, you have Cliffside and Four Lakes with Byzantines, Japanese, and Mongols. So you can go Japanese on Four Lakes, and then you can go Byzantines on Cliffside, or Mongols, I guess, but Byzantines probably on Cliffside, and then you have some pretty good matchups, pretty favorable stuff going forward. So who knows? Maybe for Scatterbrained, he's playing the long game and Baltune gets on the board, or this ends up being a tuna reverse sweep and changing the tide, pun very much intended.
I love the fact that you called it a tuna reverse sweep, because honestly, I would love to see that from Mr. Baltune. Baltune, he's a young up-and-coming player that I think a lot of people are excited about, and me included. I think he's a very talented player who definitely has a lot to show, and many people need to see exactly what it's like to come back from behind. Most of our top players, like Papi Paw, Wham, Marine Lord Beastie, they've all been down 0-2, and they've all won 3-2 in the end. So definitely not counting him out. Actually quite excited to see what the man is going to be bringing to the table. But guys, we're about to be going in, and in 5 seconds, you will be seeing some water on a map, and hopefully you guys enjoy it.
We are diving right in. Game number 3 on your monitors right now. Baltune playing as the Iobid spawning the north part of the map. Scatterbrained, his opponent, and on match point, playing as the Ottomans in the color yellow, spawning in the south. So obviously we're going to see dock out of both players. I think Scatterbrained already has a villager over there building. Baltune is going to be following if he has not already. And in Dark Age, usually there's just a little bit of posturing. You know, you're trying to get your fishing boats going. You're trying to get your fishing eco going to get up to Feudal Age. It just begs the question, who is going to get there first? And what civilization is going to get that Navy ship out first? Because that's what really sets the tone.
Now, that's exactly what I'm going to be asking myself as well here, because with the Ottomans, I feel like those 3 fishing ships, they're going to pay off pretty well. With Ottomans not always going for military schools. Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but an Ottoman without military schools, they still do pretty well. And I'm really excited to see what Scatterbrained does with that, because as we can see the spawn here, Baltune does have that forward gold, but it does have, it's quite close to the TC here. The wood line also being quite exposed, the berries all the way in China, and knowing how Aobids operates, they love a good berry stack. So these guys definitely a little bit more at risk. But the gold here on Scatterbrain's side, same thing. So I guess it depends what Baltune is going to go for. But like you said, it's about that first military ship. So if we see a culture wing, it's not going to be a big surprise.
No, I think it'd be interesting. I kind of, to be honest, after watching Corvinus play with it in the last series, I'm kind of bought in on the culture ring. I wasn't really sure what they would do, but that's definitely a good option. Obviously, for the Iobids, you could do something like military wing as well to get a Desert Raider right out of the gate. Well, you got to wait 15 seconds, so kind of stumbles its way out of the gate, but it gets there. And then you have the ability to build a ram if you want to take down the dock. But the thing of it is, just based on the geography of the map, You know, it's very difficult to actually get over to the other person's dock unless you start transporting or pulling off some of those shenanigans. You could also go eco wing to get a couple free villagers. You know, starting your game off right with an economic strength, with an economic stranglehold on your opponent could prove to be worth it as well. So Baltune does go with that culture wing. You can see the Ayubid House of Wisdom is starting to do something. Now, this is going to take a little bit less time than 1 minute 45 seconds, so hopefully he'll get there pretty quickly. Scatterbrained has not even hit the button yet. And Wayman is fixing her camera, so I will do an absolutely seamless transition going up with that culture wing. So while he goes up with it, right, it's going to take him a little bit of time, an extra minute before Scatterbrained does hit the button. Now, obviously, with the Ottomans, you're going to be able to put as many villagers as you want and get that build speed up a little bit quicker. Goes up with a lot of villagers on the Sultani trade network. So will he be able to get up? And this is kind of nice because you can use it as kind of a fast castle kind of thing. This is a landmark that maybe not many people see on a daily basis, but you get traders. You can put them, slap them right into that trade network, and they give you a little bit of extra gold. And it's really what's nice about it, just because even though you have traders in there, it's really not rateable gold because there's no units to go out and actually do something about it.
Now, with the Funny Trade Network, I feel like you're just allowing yourself to get this passive resource, and it's going to snowball pretty quickly. You get free gold, you get free units, and what does that equate to? But now, the wood situation here from Mr. Scatterbrain doesn't look too good, so it feels like he is just going to give up on this water, which will mean then that Baltune might be investing on the water, and Scatterbrained is going to try and let this work for his side. So now I said this, and as I'm saying it, I see about 6 million villagers going straight towards the wood. So Scatterbrained has not given up on the wood line. He is probably going to go make a ship any moment now. And as I say that, I could be doing the caster curse upon this poor man, and we will be seeing something completely different. We just saw a lot of gold disappearing there from Mr. Scatterbrained, so this feels like a little bit of a crazy start to everything. Where did the gold go? Oh, there's a ship. Never mind. We have a ship, boys, and it's going to be a Springald ship. Now, that's probably the only thing you can do to negate this galley that goes towards your fishing ships, but he just needs to move them as well.
Yeah, I think Scatterbrain kind of expected that to happen. And also Baltune on the other side, very good idea going for 3 fishing boats because you could just park them into your dock any more than they end up getting destroyed. I think Scatterbrain might have had a little bit of a panic. He had his neurons in a bunch. And I think he used the Sultani trade network to buy wood to get that ship out as quickly as possible, and then needed gold for the Springald ship afterwards. So, but it does go out. Obviously, that is the counter to the arrow ship. So his fish will be safe for another day and actually getting a second dock instead. So he really wants to fight on this water. He really wants to take a battle to Baltune on the water. And Baltune, I think, is just hanging out with 1 dock. We'll be going to Castle Age pretty shortly.
Age, I feel like Ayubids has a lot of firepower. They have a lot of choices here, right? They can just go for a Gulam. They can go for Camel Lancers. They can make so many things happen. While Ottomans, they do have a slow start because we talked about like that timing push that you eventually get to. But the question is he going to have time to get there? Is he going to have anything that is going to be able to carry him through to that point of the game? I think Scatterbrained is definitely going to ask himself, how do I defend this? And he's getting another ship on water as well, which means he's investing a little bit more. Scatterbrained now floating a bit of food. He's going to go for his Castle Age just after Baltune. And that's going to be pretty good for him because he's going to be able to make units that can actually deal with what Baltune is going to be serving.
Yeah, I mean, this one's pretty interesting as Baltune just hit the Castle Age button. I'm curious to see what wing he's going to be going for. But, you know, when you're playing on a map like with a shared body of water, like the stuff like Holy Island comes into memory for me, where you're battling on feudal so much, where going into castle is almost like a death sentence because you probably wanted to get more navy instead. right? So Baltune goes up with the castle age pretty quickly, goes with the economic wing to get a lot of villagers to kind of stem what he might be losing on the water. And because he's able to hit that button and not have villagers actually build it, he's still going to be able to produce what he wants to with his economy. Maybe he wants to get, I don't know, he could get a Springald ship, he can get a demo ship, but it looks like based on what Baltune is doing, he's actively choosing to not engage and will take the battle to land in castle.
And this is probably the smartest choice for him because he knows he'll be able to do damage. With Ottomans, you do need a little bit of time. The Mehmet Imperial Armory, it takes a while to get out that first unit, and there are no production buildings here for Mr. Scatterbrained. So he's getting a stable himself, but Camel Lancers, they should be able to get through most things that Scatterbrained can push out. Now, as I like to call it, the Odam button from Ottomans doesn't get available with the Janissaries to actually deal with that pretty early on. So he's going to have a very unique timing where he can get a lot of damage taken in that moment. Now, Baltune here, we can see he's floating a lot of resources. He's ready for this. The moment he hits castle, he is going to be queuing up so many Camel Lancers to deal with what Scatterbrained has. And Scatterbrained just spending resources on a Sipahi means that when he does age up, he's not going to be able to queue up a Lancer to deal with this.
Yeah, and I mean, just because of going with the Camel Lancer for Baltune, obviously for the Sipahi, or normal Knight/Lancer that the Ottoman make, you have the potential to do that little bit of unease. So now the Mangonel goes into the queue because the MIA is completed. And with that archery range going in the blacksmith increasing the production time for the Ottomans, it looks like we're going to see a couple Janissaries popping out. So he's well aware. He sees the staples from Baltune. He's like, hey, the only thing you could really make here is cavalry. So let's try to do something with it and add some gunpowder to take him down.
Now, Janissaries do cost quite a bit, and they are quite immobile. So losing them is going to be so damaging. And Baltune, he might just be using this to actually gain momentum and getting those relics. We can see the dervish behind all of this, ready to go pick up some juicy relics. Now, these villagers at the front here, they do need to pull back, keeping in mind that Abids loves them berries. They cannot let those villagers stand idly, and I don't know what the food situation is here for Mr. Baltune, but he needs to think about this pretty quickly. That Janissary blowing the scout into the next century, but the Camel Lancers are able to get to the back here. One will go down, but the Janissaries will also be paying the price. Another one sees the Janissary and he realizes this might not be as easy, but there's 6 more in the queue. Baltune wants to camel this up pretty quickly, but with the amount of villagers that Scatterbrained has here on gold, he knows that he might get pushed off, and he's trying to get as much as he can from this.
Yeah, I really like his transition now. You talked about the Janissary, and like it's like the stereotypical anti-cavalry unit that you want against something like a Camel Lancer, right? Because you're not on horseback, so you're not dealing with, you know, any kind of camel unease or the sort, and the amount of firepower that you're actually hit with each bullet that you fire into that camel frame. It ends up doing a devastating amount of damage. So Baltune could be going with some archery ranges, going to be adding in some normal archers. Don't forget, the archers for Iabids or any kind of archer is going to do a little bit of bonus damage to those Janissaries. So he definitely needs that counter.
Yeah, getting the archers is going to help significantly, and they can stay in the base to wait for those Janissaries to get out of position. Those Camel Lancers don't have a scout with them, so they don't see into those stealth forests trying to find some good damage, and Scatterbrained knows that he's going out of his base, so he needs to protect this. So at the back of his base, we see he's getting some walls so that those raids are not going to be as potent. He respects the Ayyubid cancel of camel pushes that can come in there so quickly. Now, 10 Janissaries on the field, though, that is a very scary number.
Yeah, that is a scary number, and I think probably all 10 of them combined might be able to take down a lot of those, you know, a lot of those Camel Lancers, but those Janissaries are nowhere to be found. I think they're a little bit forward. They wanted to do some kind of damage, but they got to start walking backward. A lot of Ottoman villagers end up going down. 7 total worker kills for Baltune. And let's see if Scatterbrained can get a little bit of a counter raid. He's got Sipahi. He's got the fortitude, making sure he can do a little bit of damage and have the increased attack speed for it. Baltune is going to be adding some archers to try to counteract and do some damage against these Sipahi, able to repel it. So for Baltune, I feel like he definitely won out on that battle. He got a decent amount of villagers. He's making the right units to kind of go against what Scatterbrained is doing. And now Scatterbrained has to go ahead and make some Sipahi, which against Campbell Lancers, I don't really like the look of them.
Yeah, Spy definitely not going to be able to handle those Camel Lancer charges, but they are going to be able to be pretty good against those archers if they manage to get on the back line here. But those Sipahi, very fast unit, very versatile to be able to use, but I don't feel like Baltune is getting out of his base into a risky situation anytime soon. He knows that's the weakness of this map, and he has punished that already. So these camels getting back to their safe haven, they hope, because there's no scout to see where they're going. Now, I want to point out that one raid that just happened that Baltune did on the gold, he definitely did so much damage purely because of the wall choice. The wall on the bottom side did an amazing job of ensuring that he's going to be safe. But a tiny little wall between the wood line and the gold would have changed this game completely. Instead of losing that many villagers, he might have just lost 1 or 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely softens the blow a little bit, right? Obviously. Now, Scatterbrained does have, in terms of armory value, you know, Scatterbrained definitely has the upper hand just because of how expensive those Janissaries are. I mean, obviously, with military schools, if he does have any, he will have the ability to make those Janissaries for free with the Vizier points that should be actually gotten from him. I know for Vizier points, he did get a couple Imams in the beginning to try to get some of those relics, and it looks like he was successful in doing so. There's 2 relics, another one on the way, so that's going to help him out. And then military schools, again, we get to this part, we get to this level of this unstoppable force because of the military schools, because of all of this stuff, right? And then it becomes this onslaught of military force that you don't know what to deal with. Plus, now Scatterbrained gets that siege, he gets it for free, right? Those mangonels that come in, they come out entirely for free. So maybe with all of the archers that Baltune is making, he's going to run into a problem with those mangonels.
Mangonels are just so good at dealing with these archer masses, and I feel like if Ottoman gets to the point where they're getting 19 Janissaries ready to fire at you, they're in a pretty good spot. And you see now the mech that are being clicked up as well here. This is going to provide that range defense that every army loves to have, especially when you're playing against 34 archers. So definitely a good composition here for Scatterbrained, but keeping in mind, he's still behind when thinking about these resources. You know, he does have that deep sea fish, but imagine now the difference in villagers that we're actually seeing here on land, because all those villages are on land for Baltune. They can get different types of resources. They're not just fishing on one little pond. So Scatterbrained does get those free units. He is in an okay spot, but he still needs to take this fight well. These Camel Lancers, they're so susceptible to getting one shot by these Janissaries, and luckily they move back just in time.
You know, I got to think, I mean, based on your discussion of it, I really kind of think Scatterbrained has the upper hand from an economic standpoint. I mean, you know, we talk about the villager lead for Baltune at 59 to 48, but there's boats out there. He's got the Sultani trade network. He's got these military schools pumping out stuff. So Baltune does have the military lead, but if he could decap a sacred site, this ends up going to late game, then we have a disaster for the Ayyubids. And that disaster comes in a giant cannon. If we see some of those great bombards happen in Imperial Age, it could be rather devastating if it ends up getting there. Now, Baltune is going to continue to try to raid his opponent. He's got some of those Camel Lancers. He doesn't want to take a fight straight on with them just because of the amount of Janissaries that are there. So this is a really good utility out of them, just so they actually are worth some of the value that he put in.
Yeah, the Camel Lancers are so susceptible to those Janissary shots, and he knows it. He doesn't want to lose these very expensive units, and Scatterbrain's like, oh yeah, that thing about walls? I'm on it, because the moment you let those bad boys in, they're just going to clap everything in their sights. Now, Baltune, he is going to slowly have to start doing that film transition. We saw how many he had on wood, and we can see the food per minute. It's not looking too hot. It's on the same level as Scatterbrained, considering that Scatterbrained has 3 units. this is not a position you want to be in, and we know exactly how much it slows down your game. Baltune says, I'm not ready to slow down this game. We are going to be getting deer. And that is a very juicy little deer pack standing there in the middle of the map. But those villages are quite exposed if something slides into those walls.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just getting those walls and shoring up just a little bit is almost feels a little counterintuitive, just because of Scatterbrained needs to go out on the map and actually go and, try to get one of those sacred sites to decap it or whatever the case may be. But it's just to make sure stuff like this stops happening, where Scatterbrained is idling a lot of villagers, and those gold villagers are rather important because of the army composition that he is making. He was making Sipahi. He has a lot of Janissaries. If he wants to replenish that, I'm pretty sure they're 100 gold pop. So for Scatterbrained, maybe he's just waiting. He's massing up a little bit. He's trying to get to that time where that decap does happen, but it ends up being a little bit later, because for as long as the game is for the Ottomans, it keeps, all of the economic potential, it just keeps scaling upward.
Oh, the problem is this keep coming up is going to be so pivotal. Those mangonels, so important here as well. The camels, they are trying to get a flank here. The Janissaries are making the most insane shots at them. Manjaniques being very intimidating, but shooting fire. Not the greatest against them units, but the camels do cause a little bit of unease, decreasing their damage, and the keep goes up. So this sacred site is safe for the time being. But now, like you said, the great bombards can come out here, and a great bombard with enough frontline would be quite unstoppable against a keep like that. But Baltune knows he needs to get defenses on the other sacred site as well. So more mangonels coming in the queue, and he needs to get that up as quickly as possible, because these bad boys, they're going to be coming into decap. And it looks like, honestly, I don't think there's anything Baltune can do to stop this.
Honestly, this is incredibly telling for how you play defensively in Age of Empires 4, to be honest with you, because what Baltune does, I mean, obviously he has some spearmen for protection, he has some archers in the back line. He'll try to do some damage against those Janissaries, those flaming rocks, hitting all of those Janissaries as the Sipahi trying to get around, trying to get a little bit of a flank, more flaming rocks. If anybody has any kind of trauma from that, I would understand it. But those Janissaries are going to lose a lot of their lives. Baltune, with a pretty impressive hold here, some of these archers will be able to make quick work of the Janissaries. He has too many mangonels for it to make a difference. And again, this is just kind of telling as Scatterbrained starts to back up a little bit. It's telling on how to play defensively in Age of Empires 4, because it seems like from what Baltune does is you just make a bunch of mangonels. And he had more mangonels, so he ended up winning this one.
So the Springalds are desperately trying to come in forward, doing some damage, but they're barely doing anything to these spearmen. The mangonels are so far forward, and in the end, the fire shots, because of the AoE, did more than getting him to dodge those rocks that could be firing at him. And now, with 4 minutes on the clock, I don't know if there's anything Scatterbrained can pull out. Hopefully for him, he gets that vizier point, so he's able to push back a little bit, but even then, he needs to have a front line to deal with this, and it seems like he believes he does. But this is the last moment he has to actually get set up for this. We see he's going to get that siege speed as well, and when you get your siege to move a little bit faster, they are going to be able to outdo some of the other mangonels on the other side, hopefully, for him.
Yeah, who said Byzantines didn't had all the grease, with those siege, greasing those axles, making sure they can move up just a little bit quicker. Now Scatterbrained has to take some time to replenish, obviously, and then try to go in again. 4 minutes on that sacred victory. That Sipahi is going to try to play the hero and then realize that is not a smart idea, and that's the last thing he thinks about. He goes ahead and hits the floor. So with what Scatterbrained has, because he has to break a defense, right? Because he has to do things like break all of these keeps and stone walls and all of that kind of stuff, he's the one who's got to make trebuchets. On the flip side, Baltune obviously does not. There's no keeps up there. There's no buildings that he has to worry about. So he can put all of his wood economy into mangonels. And I think we're just going to see another situation where, because Scatterbrained is making springolds as well, Baltune's just going to have more mangonels. And because of the Manjaniques having that ability to have flaming rocks, you're absolutely right, Whammon. Just because if you have so many of them and you use the flaming rock technology, it ends up being devastating.
Yeah, the problem is there is no answer to a mangonel as we used to have before, and in this case, there's no answer to a manganique, because you used to be able to build up an army of springles, target fire them, but what in anyone's right mind is going to be able to get on top of those right now? The Sabahis are just going to melt, and at this point, it's starting to look like mangonels. Still pretty good. You just need to get the numbers, and the guy with the most mangonels, they win. And this has been the case for a lot of these, especially if you have a pretty good front line, like a keep in this case. So I think this is not the intention of what this patch was about. It feels like they wanted to remove the siege wars, the stalemates that kept happening, that we constantly saw. But in turn, we just turned it into a fiery fight between a bunch of mangonels at a certain point in the game.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's pretty theatric, that's for sure. Baltune is, continuing to make all of those manganiques, and we'll have probably 8 by the time this battle goes underway. And you can see what he's making. He's making predominantly spearmen. He thinks the manganiques that he has is going to take down a lot of the Janissaries that Scatterbrained is making. So he doesn't really care, right? He's not really worried about archers, not really doing all that kind of stuff. He's got 15 to 16. He kind of thinks it's enough. Going to be trying to replace some of those stone walls with a minute 40 seconds coming in on this one. Keep trying to get repaired, but I think the trebuchets, just because of the amount of them, are going to end up taking this one down. And it looks like Baltune really is trying to defend, and Scatterbrained really has his sights on this northern area where all the trebuchets are. But I think that western sacred site might be a little bit easier.
It might be easier, but there are so many things that you could do here that might be a little bit simpler. Just like a transport ship dropping into the base, distracting Baltune for a few seconds. But both of these guys, they are fully focused and they know this is it. Scatterbrained, for him, this could mean qualifying. For Baltune, this means staying alive. So I can imagine the stress from this game is absolutely insane right now. Baltune pulling more villagers to try and repair that keep, barely staying alive. More trebuchet shots about to hit it, and this should go down. It goes down. We have 46 seconds left on the timer, but there's a lot of mangonels, and I don't know if Scatterbrained has anything to deal with this. Look at the extra walls, budget walls coming in, just wanting to cause that Sipahi pathing to be absolutely awful. So you cannot deal with the mangonels in turn.
Nope, but that's exactly what he does with those walls. He makes a little bit of a choke point. Sipahi are going to be able to try to take down that palisade wall that's over there, and we'll be efficient in doing so. But also, you're going to need to realize you got a lot of those manganiques in the back. They're all firing on the springles first before anything because of all the spearmen that are up there. And the springles are going to be able to make a little bit of an alleyway, a little bit of a choke point up in this area. Sipahi trying to get around on those manganiques, but Scatterbrained is like, yeah, there's no shot in hell we're going to be dealing with that. And we are moving on to game number 4. Baltune is on the board, ladies and gentlemen.
Baltune showing us that the water is where he exists best. Getting that A-bit lead with the villagers definitely skyrocketed him into a little bit of a lead. That pure raid just from the camel lancers getting on top of the goldvilles showed us how quickly a game can snowball just if you look away for 1 second. The villager count showing us you need to keep your eyes focused because, boys, this thing hits hard. Military, very much up and down. Ottomans getting those free units and not really getting the punch done as they needed. I felt like he didn't have the ability to get past Baltune as a unit to get into the base and raid properly, even though he had a lot of those Bahis in his hands.
Well, you can't forget, Wayman, too. Scatterbrain had the water. I'm pretty sure he did. So he still had a little bit of those boats to kind of help in that food economy, but you're still looking at resources gathered. It just goes to show, you go to Economic Wing in Castle Age, and he had a villager lead that stayed in his favor for the majority of this game. So was the Economic Wing enough to give him enough eco? And I kind of thought for Scatterbrained, he was going to have enough resources to make a lot of units and make what he needed to do and kind of fight through it. But that ended up not being the case. And Baltune, as the Iabids, are able to take this one down. Guys, we have our first qualifier to the main event. Mio Micah gets a 3-0 on Starflark. I do want to say a massive congratulations to Starflark because I know a lot of people that were probably watching this didn't expect him to get through CSO and didn't expect him to be in that round of 8 for that last qualification. But he was able to do so, and congratulations to him. I hope he has another strong showing in the next EGC tournament. And always a congratulations for Mio Micah, who is going to be making that qualification. So we're dealing with the Scatterbrained and Baltune. We still have 2 series that are left to go. I think the Avely and Corvinus series was still not started. I think it was 0-0. They might be in their first game for that matter. So we'll be checking back on them in just a little bit. Now, for our game number 4, Baltune continuing to stay alive. And now we'll be on 4 lakes going with Zushi's Legacy to Scatterbrained's Japan. Whammon, what are you thinking?
I am thinking Japan on Scatterbrained, just the right amount of, I don't know, the right amount of pressure we need. Scatterbrained has looked amazing. He's been in all places at the same time. So definitely, I'm expecting that Japan play to be masterful, to actually shut down the docks, take control. But Baltune, on the other hand, this is Zushi. Zushi is pretty okay fighting on water. And I don't know if Zushi is optimal for this map necessarily, but I do see it a lot on, massive water maps because they do have that wood bonus or the Imperial official supervising. So I don't know what to expect from this at all. I feel like Baltune may not have exactly wanted Zushi for this, but you need something that's good on water, and that's Zushi. So Japan has just been a clear favorite on most of these maps. But Tim, before we hop into the game, I just wanted to take a second to talk about Mio Micah, because yesterday Mio Micah lost to Corvinus 0-2. And today he destroyed everyone. That is amazing. Absolutely showing that you just need to get your head on straight, and some days you'll perform better than others. And I think that's showing exactly what's happening with a lot of these players. Sometimes you play consistently, and sometimes you lose against a plat player.
Absolutely. I'm one of those who have done that as well. Whammon, you and me both. But that's the thing. That's why you got 2 shots at it. The first one, maybe you didn't do so well. Second one, you end up turning it around, and it just goes to show the skill level of all of these players on, as an American football saying, on any given Sunday, you might be able to do it. So Scatterbrained will be trying to clinch his spot into that round, or that main event, I should say, of EGC Masters game number 4. We're diving right in a okay. Great. Okay, great.
Nice.
So Zeus, Baltune, I try to time it. Baltune playing as Zushi's Legacy in the color red, spawning in southeastern portion of the map. His opponent, Scatterbrained, as the Japanese up on the northwest. Now, we see Japanese played on this map over and over and over and over again. Zushi is a little bit different. Women of a choice. Usually we see Abyssids or Iabids or something like that, but you're absolutely right. And the intermission that we had was the wood economy for Zushi's Legacy can be pretty crazy. Remember, with this, it's not like China. So you have 5 villagers and you start with an Imperial official. And that amount of tempo to continue to get that wood economy and to get the gold through taxes might end up making Feudal Age a little bit easier for Baltune to transition to. And we all know about Scatterbrained and the Japanese benefits getting those fishing boats a little bit cheaper.
Now, the fact that he gets those boats for cheaper is great, but getting that gold for free as well also allows you to just get ahead pretty quickly. You get the extra wood drop-off, so I feel like these 2 civs balance each other out pretty well on water, with Japanese having a slight bit of an edge. So we see now Scatterbrained making the next boat, and usually the question is, how many boats do you make before you go feudal? And I think most players would be around 4 or 5 before they start to click that button. We see on maps with only 1 deep sea fish when we see 3 boats. But we'll see here what Mr. Scatterbrained does. I assume Japanese is also one where you go for the lesser. I say this and I see all those villagers just chopping at that tree, and I know this is going to be a boat shenanigan. Now, with the amount of dead deer here, we can see that Japan, they don't care about the berries today. Today is a deer day. They just want to eat as much as possible. So these Japanese villagers going to be snacking on that venison, making sure that they get that extra gather rate and get to feudal so much quicker.
Yeah, that's really heads up play because it's Japan, obviously you have to get your farmhouse down somewhere and it's that food drop off. But before you get some of those wheelbarrow technologies for the Japanese, Tawara, Takazaiku, all of those, what happens is before you get those, berries are still just normal berries. So if you're not going to focus on getting those technologies, you might as well go for something else. And that's exactly what he does, going for those deer. So, and obviously pulling them will prove to be beneficial right next to that farmhouse. So maybe it propels Scatterbrained to get to feudal age just a little bit quicker. On the flip side, Zushi has the ability to get to feudal age quicker, not only with taxes and obviously that wood economy, making sure you're getting enough fishing boats, but also that it is cheaper. It is 340 food, 170 gold to go up to feudal age for the first time for Baltune. So maybe he hits that button a little bit quicker than intended, or expected, I should say.
A Baltune with that extra little bit of gold income from the Imperial official does help that along. You only have to get a few on that gold, and it's only a little bit later than most. So we see now with the count here, both of these are going to be going up pretty much at the same time. Cocker Township coming out, not the biggest surprise whatsoever. And the Japanese house being built right next to those little fish on the sides, they are just going to be, it's just going to be perfect to drop off for that villager. So the villager stays in the vicinity and he can quickly get that little bit of population space that you need. But also, he's going to easily pivot to that lake on the eastern side.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the idea with the farmhouse, and this is a little bit different from what we usually see from Japanese. Obviously, you don't really see that, but we do see the cocoa. We do know those shinobi are going to be there. Now, with this meditation gardens for Baltune, he's going to be able to get a decent amount of wood based on where it is, and obviously he gets that gold that's there. So you get a little bit of wood, get a little bit of gold. It might help you in the navy proportion if you want to put a cheeky dock out there, but also it gives you the ability, because Zushi, I always found Zushi to be a little bit more of a tempo civ than China, because a lot of those unique bonuses that China has to change dynasties to get, Zushi just gets. And the number one thing that I'm thinking about is Zugnu, right? You don't need to go to Song Dynasty to get the Zugnu. You just build an archery range and you get them. So if you're trying to deal with Shinobi, Zugnu might be a pretty good strategy to do that.
Oh, and that's exactly what he's sniffing tonight. Archery range coming out, and we know that Zushi gets those Zugnu. Instead of China needing Song Dynasty, they can just make it instantly. Now, Baltune having a lot on wood, and he got double broadaxe. Now, with the Imperial official supervising that, he was getting it in no time. So this is going to mean with that amount of wood, he can be pumping out any ship that he wants. Well, first Zugnu coming on out, and it's going straight towards that western lake. So probably going to be cleaning up that scout that was hitting it. But now we do see that dock coming up too, and that villager could be going down, but it looks like he's going to be making it out alive. So with the ship that you can be getting over here out of that dock, you're baiting a reaction from Baltune. If you decided not to go for it, he's still going to be investing a lot more on ships. He does decide to go for it, but the Shinobi is also in the vicinity. I saw the boys sneaking around, looking at the boar. He's like, that's a nice big piece of meat.
Yeah, he thought about pulling that pork, but decided to go in the opposite direction over there on the south side. So it looks like he will be trying to torch down that dock or sabotaging it forever. That you might want to do. Just because you have two different Shinobi, it can give you the ability to do that. Sabotage does come in, but Baltune already has a decent sized navy here. He's got an extra ship. He's got an arrow ship and a springald ship that can prove to be favorable for him. Baltune's villager starting to move a little bit to the north side to try to create some duress over in the Japanese food development. So the Japanese did end up going with these horsemen to try to protect the Shinobi because he figured Zugnu were coming out. Honestly, for Scatterbrained, super heads-up play.
Mm-hmm. Amazing work, because getting that, you're already shutting down one Zugnu, and they're not cheap. They do cost an array of resources, but with the Meditation Gardens, they are quite a bit more official. And look at that beautiful, beautiful blink here. Villager goes down. The horseman will go down, but he'll take a victim alongside him. The scout quaking in his boots to his death. And that was a beautiful pickup here by Scatterbrained. Scatterbrained honestly showing us why he belongs in the top 16 for this tournament. So I don't know if this is going to be enough, but we'll see if that Shinobi Blink can do a bit more. I don't wonder what the cooldown is on that.
You can't sleep on those Shinobi. I mean, having the ability, obviously, to blink and do that stuff, Shunshin, is what it's called. Their amount of damage that they do is absolutely insane. You know, you get them in a villager line and you're not paying attention, your whole wood line or wherever you're raiding could get decimated very quickly if you're not careful. So Baltune making sure his Zugnu stay relatively at home while trying to get some of these docks up. And I think Scatterbrain has seen it with the military ship that's there. However, he let 2 docks go up, and that villager over there for the Japanese wasn't really doing anything about it.
Yeah, he was just fishing, looking at that beautiful little pile of fish that he could be fishing, snacking for all of the village. But he also got a dock there. Scatterbrain got a dock there on the western side. So now we're expanding towards the other lakes. 2 lakes were left untouched for quite a while. And you want to make sure that you get the most out of these lakes. And slowly expanding like this is going to allow Scatterbrain to just flood constant units. He gets another pickup, which is massive. Also, ensuring that that barracks gets shut down for a little bit. Now, he does see that dock coming out here. So he's going to know where to go next. But you can see here from Baltune, he's forced Scatterbrain to also invest on that water. And I don't know if he's going to want to invest a lot fighting that. And we can see he's just going for the land army, Zhugunu being queued up more and more because he realizes if I just invest more into this, I'm going to end up losing a lot more on my ships.
That's the thing, too, for Baltune, his goal is exposed, right? I mean, you're looking at the Japanese and their hoarding of resources on the top left part of your screen with about 1,000 food and about 200 gold. He's making just 1 or 2 horsemen just to keep his shinobi safe. But he will be hitting the Castle Age button quicker unless Baltune has something to say about it. Now, both of those docks on the north side, you saw them getting sabotaged pretty frequently, you know, making sure that you can't make a boat by any extent of the imagination. So he tried to go for that little bit of a cheeky play. That's just the kind of offense and or defense that you have with those shinobi. If it's your pond, you could sabotage and make sure that they don't take them down. If it's an offensive pawn, if it's an opponent's pawn, you can make sure that you can take it and prove it to be a problem. So Baltune had to spend a decent amount with those Zugnu in terms of defense, and he did lose a couple villagers in the process. So it goes to show, I mean, how much for those resources, how much did he really get the payoff for it? It looks like because Scatterbrain's the first one going to Castle Age, maybe not as much.
Now, the problem is now the gate has been suspended. It's floating high in the sky, and you can see it's already rallied right on top of that stable. And once that stable is producing, we are just going to be seeing an insane amount of samurai pressure. Baltune does pick up a villager here as well, but those shinobis have paid off. They caused idle time. They're delaying this age up significantly. And Baltune, even though he's going to follow suit pretty soon, look at all those villagers on gold, as Vodka was pointing out. And now, back onto food. They just want to make sure that they get all of them out there, making sure they get enough resources so those horses can start running right into the base of Baltune. Now, with Baltune's economy slowly closer to the base, it's going to start being exposed. And with Zhugunu, they don't do too well against those mounted samurais. Floating Gate comes in, and we see... Oh my goodness. Are you seeing we get a bannerman first? Very nice.
Oh yeah, nice little and it comes out very quickly, obviously because Daimyo Palace was achieved, so it's going to give you a little extra damage out of those mounted samurai. And that's why, for Baltune, he went into the barracks just about immediately. Like, he knew the mounted samurai were coming, and obviously, you know, you don't really need to scout it to figure that out, right? I mean, obviously, it's your best unit, so you're going to be able to do something about it. Bannerman just going in by himself for the most part, taking a couple of spears while he's trying to do some raiding around this area where Baltune is starting to get his gold. He's getting a lot of barracks. He's adding an archery range as well. Shaolin Monastery did get clicked, but it's not necessarily getting built yet. I don't know where it is or who is trying to build it. Now we have a gaggle of Zushi villagers trying to get it. So that will go up very quickly. right? He needs some of those Castle Age upgrades for the Spearmen. He can add some Crossbowmen as well for the Mounted Samurai. So Baltune's kind of got a hold here.
Problem is that Shaolin Monastery comes up, and what's next? So, oh my goodness, I say what's next, but look at how much Scatterbrained has sacrificed already. He's lost so many of his units. They're just running straight into the Spearmen, and I guess this is just the one moment of focus that you lose, and you just lost almost 800 resources right there. So this is putting him into a very weird position now because he had this lead, he had the versatility, and he's just sacrificed so much already. Now these guys are going to be able to flank around. They are very, very mobile, and this army from Zushi is quite slow, but they need to find some damage pretty quickly because Zushi is just living his best life here at the back.
But, you know, Baltune, actually, those Zug Nu ended up being, and you with those Spearmen, ended up kind of being in sync. Because the Zug Nu with those little bolts that are there ended up taking the top off those samurai. The deflection wasn't there, right? So the spearmen were able to get there and get a decent amount of damage. Because usually, I mean, you've mounted samurai against feudal spearmen, you have a decent amount of samurai, you could just kind of steamroll your way through it because of that deflection. Didn't really seem to be the case just because of that. Now, Castle Age spearmen do come in for Baltune. He is getting some crossbowmen as well to kind of help him out. Maybe that tower needs a little bit of a hand cannon slit just to make sure some of those heavy units end up getting a lot of damage. Now, Scatterbrained did target the IO. That is an Imperial official down. He has collected his last tax. And that's really important because those are expensive units that come into the town center. You would rather make villagers instead of spending more on that.
And you can see how many of them are idle now. It says 21 idle, but that's a lot more. Those villages are just pouring into the TC. And even if he loses all of these, you're still losing so many resources in idle time that it does become kind of worth it. So a few of the mounted samurais do go down, but the idle time has been immeasurable. And Scatterbrained, he has already picked up 2 relics behind this. So the Shaolin monks, they've been made, but the relics have not been secured yet. And you can see here, these mounted samurais with these small amounts of spearmen, they are pretty good at killing them. But the traits, not the most optimal. The problem is just where to now. Scatterbrained also moving out on the map a little bit. So he's going to be exposed for a little while. I just don't think Baltune has anything he can do about that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of crazy watching those spearmen go down. I mean, they're Castle Age spearmen. Don't get me wrong. Like the mounted samurai, they're expensive units. As far as army value goes and cost efficiency, I guess you would wager that the mounted samurai end up winning that battle. But you just don't think it's going to be that devastating, you know, for Baltune. But now that he's got some crossbowmen in with those spearmen, any kind of deflection, it will be a decent deflection, but there's just so many hits going with them with spearmen and all that kind of stuff. So now Scatterbrained is going to make a little bit of a change. And this is something that I feel like a lot of Japanese players are doing nowadays because you're seeing spears and you see crossbowmen up against all those mounted samurai you make. So then what do? You get a bunch of barracks and you start pumping out Ona Bugisha to slice and dice your way through those spearmen, through those crossbowmen, and they are very effective at doing so. Scatterbrained just go ahead and slap down 20 in the queue. He's got 6 out there now. I would imagine some Yoroshiru ends up in those barracks at some point or another, so he's going to be able to get those out very quickly. Baltune's got to be thinking about what he wants to do to change it. Once he sees those Onabugisha, he's going to start to make a composition, but it's all about actually seeing them. Maybe Scatterbrained hides it.
Now, the problem is when... Oh, Scatterbrained is taking so much damage with these guys, and they're just running through the spearmen. I don't know if Scatterbrained has the ability to replace these right now. The villages that he picks up here, they are a very good pickup, but we can see they're desperately trying to wall themselves in. Very good job on the walling here. And we can see, again, a lot of idle time, but this time, I don't know if it was worth it. That this was quite an expensive raid as well, and these villages are pretty much cured in there now. I say this, and then the Bugeshas are gonna run in and try and slice and dice a few of those villages that just went back thinking that they are safe.
Yeah, and let's see if Scatterbrained is able to do it, because this is going to kind of be the ball game for him. This is the tempo that he really needs. A lot of villagers from Zushi ended up going down. Economic count is obviously higher for the Japanese because of how many worker kills he had. And now that all of those Onabugisha are coming out, Baltune's starting to make... It looks like he tried to add a couple Zugnu in, but continuing to go with the crossbowmen. Whether it's Palace Guard, whether it's Spearmen, it's going to prove to be rather difficult for you to deal with these Onabugisha. And they're relatively cheap, 60 food, 20 gold. We'll be able to try to take them down. Now, a lot of spearmen are getting in on mounted samurai at the north part, but these crossbowmen are going to be able to make quick work of them. These mounted samurai and the Onabugisha are going to have to back up just because of the sheer mass that Baltune had. Because you think the Onabugisha ends up being a good call, but I really don't think there was enough.
The Gishas, they did an amazing job at cleaning up some of those villages, but this is still quite risky here for Scatterbrained, because even though Baltune lost a lot here, his army is quite impressive. So if he decides to move out, I think those crossbows could be quite good. The Onabugishas, though, the moment they get on top of you, that's when things start to get hairy. And I think Baltune knows this. He's switching out to horsemen right now, and we'll see if this is going to pay off. I feel like the one thing I'm missing this game is the constant action on water. It feels like they've decided which two legs belong to them, and it is what it is. The Bugishas are a little bit out of position here, but luckily they run as fast as a Bugatti. They will get out of here mostly unscathed. We do see 4 bodies on the floor, but it is what it is. The price had to be paid.
Yeah, and those crossbowmen, it was kind of interesting because I thought Baltune might make a little bit of a Zugnu transition, right? But those crossbowmen, I think they have enough base damage where they end up being okay against those Bugisha, and we saw how effective they were. Now, Baltune does have +2 melee armor, which is going to be very important against those Onabugisha because of how quickly they go. Scatterbrain continuing to raid over on the side of Shaolin Monk with a little ooh over there, so those villagers end up being safe. And Scatterbrain has to back up yet again and avoid getting walled in. So overall, when it comes to army composition from Baltune, I'm more of a fan of what he's doing. Now, Sacred Site timer is about 7 minutes and some change. Scatterbrain trying to get some defensive emplacements. Look at that with those outposts, getting some of those springolds to help out. And we're kind of reaching a similar avenue to what we saw last game, but the roles are reversed.
The problem is, I don't know if Scatterbrained can be stopped here. He's gotten so much map control. He's in a pretty good position, and him splicing off this huge amount of units here, it is not even a sacrifice if he can run those into the villages. Now, those two on stone, they're again idle, and you might lose these, but you're keeping the army of Baltune busy. You're keeping him focused. And yes, Baltune does have a second TC trying to catch up, but I just don't feel like the second TC is going to pay off in 6 minutes, where you have the units to be dealing with all of those towers that are getting reinforced on the left side. As we can see, those upgrades kicking in, they are going to be so hard to deal with, because those springald emplacements, they are so tough, especially against your army. They're going to one-shot your crossbowmen, who are just trying to slide into the DMs and go right through the units that are slicing and dicing you. And the samurais now being added, though, I'm a little bit confused about the samurais being added. It feels like when you get the samurais against all those crossbows, you probably just get them to focus you for a little bit. But the horsemen switch up, definitely a good answer to what Baltune has on offer. And now with the mangonel being paired there as well, the mangonel getting a good shot off all those crossbowmen, that's going to be Scatterbrained going into the tournament. And Baltune knows how high risk this is. So I'm excited to see how Baltune plays this. This is going to be so important. He gets Grenadiers at the same time. He gets Siege Engineering behind this. He knows he's going to need to fight those towers. So Baltune is going to need to make sure that he micros this perfectly.
So there is a little bit of a deviation as to what we saw last game, as you're talking about him bolstering up the defenses that Scatterbrained is doing. He's making a bunch of outposts, but that's the thing. That's what he's making. He's making outposts. Japanese don't get castles. They get castles, not keeps. They don't get them until Imperial Age. So you don't have this giant structure that you have to treb through. You can get 1 or 2 trebs and take down an outpost pretty easily, whether it's fortified or otherwise, right? So that could be an avenue that Baltune wants to go instead. Maybe get 1 or 2, or keep going on the mangonel train, because Scatterbrain already has 2 mangonels. Baltune, it might behoove him to get some siege for himself. Now, military count ends up a little bit in favor of Scatterbrain, but army value, just because of the Lancers from Baltune, ends up being a little higher. And what I'm seeing, based on the amount of and the composition of units I'm seeing from Scatterbrain, he's got some Onabugisha, he's got some Samurai, a little bit of horsemen. I'm not seeing any spears or crossbowmen here.
Now, the problem is with this composition, I don't know if we're just heading towards the same path we saw in the previous one. Or we're just going to get a bunch of mangonels that end up being stacked up. But luckily, they've steered away from that mostly. But the Springolds get queued up more from Scatterbrained. These pro players, they are fully committed to these Springolds. They know something that we don't. And I think everybody in Twitch chat has been asking themselves, what have those Springolds been doing? And we're about to find out. The keeps, like you said, they're not there. These towers are quite squishy, but villages are a little bit exposed.
And it looks like that siege might be a little bit exposed as well. I don't know where Scatterbrained is in terms of his army, but that could be colossal. Mangonels are all going down. That's what really was going to keep you into this game. Springolds from those towers, firing those bolts as fast as they can. Grenadier is going to be able to get some decent AoE damage. And again, there really isn't anything to deal with or deal with effectively a lot of the Lancers that are here. You have Grenadiers and Crossbowmen making a good job. Some Springolds are coming out on the western side to try to do something against a lot of those units. But that Mangonels and that siege that was caught there at the choke point was pivotal. And I think Baltune wins this game as a result.
Yeah, the problem is coming back from this is going to be so difficult. Doesn't matter which side you are on because you just lost so much. We see the Springolds, they're just firing as much as they can, but it just doesn't feel like they are having that impact that Scatterbrained believed they would have here. These samurais slicing and dicing as much as they can. And now Baltune winning this fight, sure. Now the question is he going to be able to continue this push? Because it does feel like he's struggling with some resources here too. And Scatterbrained, even though he didn't win this, he's still got those towers and the Sacred Side timer is still ticking. So he's still going to be able to hold these off with a little bit of time. Baltune now 92 vils. His economy is looking great. We can see both of these players at about 1.5k food per minute, so they're going to keep pumping out units. And you can see they're spending every last bit they can. And now the Rams are joining the party. Scatterbrain's not ready to give up. Look at those samurais being queued up. But 17 crossbowmen, that's going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the kicker, Wham. And I mean, he's continuing to make samurai in a time where Baltune has a lot of knights and crossbowmen, which are basically the two things that I would want to have going against samurai. So that's going to prove to be a little difficult. He makes a couple rams just to make sure that you're able to take down some of those outposts. And the best thing about those rams, if they don't get taken down by Mangonels, Onabugisha, or whatever, as long as they sit there in the sacred site, the timer gets stopped. But we'll see if he's going to be able to do that. One ram, two ram going into that fortified outpost. The timer has stopped at 1:50 seconds. And again, reproducing this army. Scatterbrained didn't have it, and Baltune did. Grenadiers coming in, taking off the deflection of those samurai, which proved to be an amazing choice, as the samurai end up getting rocked with those lancers, getting in on those mangonels, starting to take them down as well. Military count for Baltune, 50 to Scatterbrained's 12. So you talked about reproducing this army, or lack thereof. Scatterbrained is the one who can't do it, and this sacred site's going to get taken.
And that just shows the difference between having a keep and having these reinforced towers. They were target firing these units, but they are just not as durable. So beautiful play here by Baltune. He waited until the latest possible moment when he got that advantage. And Baltune, honestly, could this be the ultimate reverse sweep we're seeing here from Balchad?
Now, don't get me wrong, this game is not over. You know, Baltune might have a little bit of eco lead. You know, obviously he has a little bit of military right now, but we'll see if Baltune, there is a potential for a little bit of overextension if he doesn't really see where he is in terms of game sense and where he is in the game. So he's doing a really good job of cherry picking off a lot of these individual units, and we're going to see if he's able to actually do damage to eco, if he's really able to put that exclamation point onto this game. Now Baltune is coming up here. Rams taking down those outposts. He's trying to find villagers to kill and does so effectively now with Scatterbrained at almost a 30 villager deficit. So Scatterbrained's going to be tough for him to master and muster up that infantry that he needs. Although for infantry, I really think, you know, I'm not sure how effective it's going to be.
Now my question is just, is Scatterbrained going to try and keep holding on? for a little bit more, or is he ready to go into the final game? And honestly, I think even I have underestimated the power of Baltune and his ability to outlast, thinking that Baltune might tilt himself. But no, the man does not. Baltune constantly raining. Look at how he's shutting every part down. He took some damage, he came back from it, and those horses are doing work against these villagers. At the front here, the crossbows are doing their best, but they're just not able to clean these up just yet. The Bugattis slicing through everything they can, but is Scatterbrained going to be able to find that answer? Oh, there's just so many dead villagers. Baltune, stop! They're already dead.
This is a massacre. Like, that's devastating. You know, I mean, yeah, something army composition, but now Baltune has double the villagers just because of all of the raids that were able to do it. And it's one of those situations, I don't know, if I'm Scatterbrained, I see that gold mine and half those villagers go down, I'm like, okay, like let's just get out of here. But he does, because this is his match point and will continue to be for game number 5. He wants to try to give it all he's got, you know, and make sure, even though the Sacred Site got decapped and it looks like he's trying to recapture it, he's still going to try to get the win out of this game because, again, this is what gets you into the main event. So make sure that you have a 0% chance before conceding. And it looks like Scatterbrained is doing just that, adding in some Mounted Samurai. A lot of these Grenadiers, the amount of damage that they're doing, I mean, I get it against the infantry because they don't have a lot of health, but they are rather impressive, and they are impressing me. They're one of the reasons why, just with Zushi's Grenadiers, or just multiple units in general, one of the reasons why I think an infantry civ like Japan is kind of in a bad place right now, because there's so many things to deal with them.
Understood that Grenadiers were this good. And finally, you can actually see the power they have. And I think if you factor into the damage into what they did in those previous fights as well, especially with those masses, they definitely showed their value. Baltune now putting the keep down, and Baltuna, he's decided he wants to be more aggressive. He wants to end this game. He's got enough vills. He knows he's killed about 600 of Scatterbrained's villagers, and he's ready for more. We can see that TC was firing rockets. It was wonderful, but it's not going to be enough. Unless you fire multiple rockets at once, you are not going to be able to stop this. And the villagers get pulled back. He doesn't want to lose any of them, even though he's this far ahead. With that keep being placed down here, it's going to be so hard for Scatterbrained to answer to this, because he doesn't have the resources to get something to break this down. It's just going to be at the front of his base, and it's going to be a destruction on anything that pops out of that TC. Or out of the production building.
And that's the thing. I mean, it was a Chinese or a Chinese variant keep, so those villagers build super, super quick. So getting that thing up was more of an inevitability than an actual question. That thing, no matter how much army Scatterbrained had, I think that keep was going up whether he liked it or not. So continuing on the Grenadiers, he obviously has the economy to do so. You can see how much food he's getting per minute, and he even has villagers on food, which is going to prove to be a benefit for him. Now, Baltune has some of this map control. Again, with these roles getting reversed, does he try to get a Sacred Site victory or something like that? Scatterbrained does have both of them, but a decap can happen quickly. It looks like Baltune is going to on that southwestern one, and it looks like he might be going for the other one too.
Oh, and he's going for more villagers. Guys, I want us to take a moment of silence for all these dead villagers that have gone down in honor of Scatterbrained trying to qualify for this event. They fought bravely, they've chopped a lot of wood, and now apparently these lancers are going to try their best to burn down rock-hard steel. Eventually it does pay off though, but the villagers from Baltune, they want to pay their respects as well, and they're moving across the map, probably about to pull some shenanigans that none of us are ready for, or just being sacrificed to the cause of Deadvilles. Never mind, there's a keep coming, and Scatterbrained's gold is about to be shut down. Another moment of silence for all the dead villagers, victims of the keep.
And again, you think that that thing is not going to go up, you're out of your mind. Another outpost ends up going down. Grenadier going to make quick work of that. Scatterbrained backing up yet again. Four Lakes is a rather tricky map like this because of the gold. It ends up being a little bit more forward after you get those ponds. So you get that water, and then you kind of move it into land control to get some of those other resources. Not something that Scatterbrained was able to keep because of those sacred sites. And don't look now, the tuna has it tied.
Just like that, Tuna is showing us that he is one of the big ones. He knows how to go 0-2 and make it a maybe 3-2. He has to prove us right in one more game. We can see the economy count. Definitely, it was a battle. Baltune was behind for a while, but that second TC that he built definitely kept him in this game. And those raids, those beautiful, beautiful raids, showed us he knows how to play the late game as well. Military count as well. Scatterbrained, he hit a peak and he sacrificed so many of these. That pivotal fight under the towers just did not go his way. And this leads me to asking the question again. The Springles, are they really worth it? Because every single time we see someone making these Springles, they haven't showed any difference in these fights. And I don't know if this is just a firing problem with some of them, or with the angle that sometimes doesn't go right. But the Springles, it leaves a big question mark. Look at all those resources. Dead even. That is crazy. Baltune using resources wisely.
Like, don't get me wrong. I kind of, when we were talking about Springles, like, we did see the first game that we saw them. It was Corvinus playing as Roos. And obviously, the Springles ended up becoming pretty superior because there wasn't really many units to try to take down those mangonels, number one. Number two, he had about 15 of them. So I feel like if you make 15 of any siege apparatus, you're probably going to end up doing pretty good. So I don't know if that necessarily shows the pound for pound kind of strength of the Springald, or just that the fact that you had 1 million of them ends up being the damage dealer. So the other Springald games that we saw didn't prove to be as effective. So again, I'm not sold. I'm not making a Springald in any of my games, and I encourage anybody who matches up with me on the ladder to make Springalds because I need elo. Now, going into game number 5 here, this is match point for both players, Baltune and Scatterbrained. It's going to be English. For Baltune, it's going to be Byzantines. For Scatterbrained, it's going to be a good one.
I am so excited about seeing this on Cliffside, because if there's one thing we know about Cliffside is English is a nightmare. We've all played against longbows. Now, I know we haven't seen longbows for a while, but the pro players have whipped them out when they are on a small map. And Cliffside, you do have that problem when you're playing Byzantines, where you are so susceptible to that first push that comes out. I just don't know if it's going to hit the same way as it used to. So Baltune playing my favorite civilization in this world, English, and Scatterbrained on Byzantines. I mean, I'm rooting for both these civilizations, which is a really big problem, but I'm so scared for Byzantines based on the choices of English. Byzantines has a really strong mid game, and I feel like they can overwhelm English quite quickly, but only if English gives them that time. And I don't know if Baltune is the kind of guy who will give you the time.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some potential for Baltune to do a little bit of, or Scatterbrained, I should say, doing a little bit of feudal age shenanigans, right? For the Byzantines, they can get up in feudal a little bit quicker. Not sure what Baltune wants to do. I mean, we all know for the English, something that's been a thorn in my side over the past, 3 years, is English existing, but all going with the normal build that they have been going, and that's 2TC Abbey of Kings. Is Byzantines going to have the firepower to stop it? Is there going to be some feudal age? Is there going to be some gulping? Is there going to be, there can be there could be a number of things that end up happening. I'm not saying what's good. I'm not saying what's bad. I'm just giving you all the options. And ladies and gentlemen, you can make your assumption as to what you want to do. But I do know whoever wins this game is going to be one of the last spots in the main event. So they are leaving it all on the battlefield here.
What's pretty crazy to me is that Anatand, also from Belarus, has been growing in these last few months insanely well. This man has been performing so well. And now his brother in arms, Scatterbrained, is next on this list. And to me, that is just fantastic to see two players from a very small region actually do so well. We know that these regions have their own tournaments as well, the CIS tournaments, and they definitely have been very active over there. So Amazing work by both of these players, and I'm glad to see that we see two players coming both from a very underdeveloped region that they're doing pretty well in.
Yeah, I mean, teamwork makes the dream work, right? You get probably both of these players do a lot of custom games with one another, and that's part of what makes a good team. You genuinely want the other person to be successful, and let's see if Scatterbrained can end up being successful in this game. Number 5, I'm ready to jump in. Wham, you ready?
I am ready, and I'm ready to see it on Cliffside. Hell yeah, brother.
All right, we're diving right in. Our pivotal match point game number 5. Baltune playing as the English. Spawning in the north, playing as the color red. Scatterbrained is his opponent, playing as the Byzantines in the color blue. Now, I will say, for Scatterbrained, pretty nice spawn here. He's got some gold in the back. He's got some berries in the back. That's pretty helpful for him. Baltune playing English. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it doesn't matter what his spawn is because he makes farms anyway.
That's actually quite interesting. We've only seen from the last few games that last few rounds that I've watched, 2 players make those 2 early farms. And usually this is when they go longbows, or just for a 1 TC King play. So it's a very slippery slope of what could actually be happening here, but we only see 2 on gold. We know that's when they pull it off a little bit earlier. And I'm excited to see what the decision is going to be here, specifically because of the spawn that you mentioned. So Scatterbrained, he's got that wood line at the back there. Beautiful. The gold right next to it. And the berries that will just complement it so, so dearly. So longbows have to travel an extra few steps to get to this juicy, juicy region at the back. Now the question is just, is he spicy enough to go for longbows on this map? But Scatterbrained already pretty close to kicking up, and I'm expecting to see a little bit of just our winery, no crazy hippodrome plays. We are not sitting here in a gulping region. I don't believe any of these players are gulpers. We do not gulp in this community, Tim. I don't know what we're doing there in Conk 1, but gulping is a very, very tough thing to pull off at these high levels. Because if it doesn't pay off, woo!
See, but that's the thing, Wayman. I love to gulp.
I know you do.
I love to gulp.
You want to gulp, Tim?
Sorry. The Baltune on the other side. Yeah, I got a little bit excited. Baltune on the other side, not going with the Abbey of the Kings, and is going to be going with the Council Hall. So he does want to get aggressive. He wants to end this game quick. He wants to end this game before the Byzantines can get their feet out from under them. And I mean, for Longbowmen, it is difficult for Byzantines to kind of deal with. You know, they get their mercenary house, which is great. They can get javelin throwers if they want to, which is also great. But you're going to need a couple of minutes on those berry patches to actually get the javelin throwers necessary, right? With those Council Hall units, those Longbowmen that come out pretty quickly, you might be able to do some damage. Now, Scatterbrained already has an outpost and is starting to build it where that winery is. And the reason why you're laughing, Whammon, is because where those Longbowmen go, that outpost isn't going to be in range.
Exactly. The outpost is there to protect a very, very small region. But the longbows, they have legs. 2 of them, in fact. Now, guys, I don't know if any of you in the chat have 2 legs, but they're quite mobile. So when using both of these legs, you can see how easily they would be able to pivot between those 2 wood lines, get around the wood line. And with the longbow opening, we know this is going to be a tough thing to deal with. Baltune just timing it perfectly so we have just enough wood to queue up that first one the moment he ages up. And now we can definitely see this is going to be a tough thing for Scatterbrained to deal with, but he respects this. Most people do, because they know the power of the civilization. Now, opening with the stable, very important play here, and it might keep him alive if Baltune takes long enough to get there.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting as far as Byzantine's macro is concerned. They want to, obviously with that winery, they want to gather a lot of berries, and you see how many villagers are on berries because you need that oil. So you end up having a little bit of a surplus of food a little bit later. It's something that I've come to realize playing Byzantines. And a lot of their units that you want to make, the horseman being 100 food, the Limitine being more food than the average spearman is, you have the ability to kind of macro yourself perfectly to get the oil and get enough units to make sure you're safe. Now, Baltune, he must have scouted that stable and seen where the stable is. So he's going to back up with some of those longbowmen. Hopefully you get a barracks out to try to get some spears if you're going to continue to remain offensive, and that's what he does. He does have one in the queue and does a very particular thing that if you are playing English in lower elos, and I know most of you are, you sicken me, but you do. The spearman, you got to make sure if you're getting a group of longbowmen out there, bring a spearman with it because horsemen can really pick off those reinforcements rather quickly. So having those longbowmen just out in harm's way could prove to be devastating and really stop your snowball.
The problem is, I don't know if Scatterbrained is gonna let Baltune just sit in his base and keep making longbows. I feel like he's the kind of guy who would actually do something with this. And as I say this, look at how 4 longbows are gonna try to take these on with one singular spearman. This is so risky, but Scatterbrained does not want to take that risk. He realizes, I'm gonna just pull back. And behind this, my question is, what does Scatterbrained do now? Because now these longbows on your base, you have a singular spearman, and I'm not really sure what Scatterbrained's plan is here. He's pulled off of gold as well. He realizes, I just don't have the ability to. And this is now the weak point for English, where you pick off their reinforcements. And I feel like this is the only thing that Scatterbrained can do. And at the same time, as I say that, he's not producing anything. So I don't really know what the answer is here for Mr. Scatterbrained. He's as confused as I am, I think.
Well, you know, Baltune's doing a good job of keeping the spearmen with longbow groups, which is important. That wood line gets compromised on the eastern side because the longbowmen shoot from another dimension. Goes with the western mercenary contract, which means he will be able to get his own longbows. And he's thinking, hey, if I'm dealing with longbows with that kind of range, I'm probably going to need some of my own range to take care of this, so that's what he's going for. He won't necessarily have as many longbowmen, obviously, just because it's a mercenary contract and he doesn't have the council hall, but it could definitely be advantageous to him to continue to stay defensive. He has a lot of food in the bank. He's got about 600. His gold has been compromised just for the time being, but hopefully he gets back to it at some point because maybe he's thinking Castle Age is what's going to save him.
The problem is Castle Age is not necessarily going to give you any units that can deal with what English has on offer. When you have this many longbows, you can take on a men-at-arm, you can take on a knight or a cataphract in this case. And Baltune, behind this, he's just getting his farms ready, making more longbows, making singular spearmen by singular spearmen, and Scatterbrained, is about to get a little scout for snacking.
And that one might go down. It looks like the longbowman will provide some reinforcement along with the spearman as well. So the scout's going to provide a little bit of vision to kind of help you out. Scatterbrained already lost, it looks like, 1 villager and trying not to lose more. But I don't think it's necessarily the villagers that you lose. It's the villagers that you're idling. And getting those longbowmen back and forth, making them pull off of that wood line over and over and over again. It just means wood that you're not getting. You know, you're going to run out of safe food at some point. You're going to need olive groves. You might not have the wood to do it. So he has a lot of food, which is great, but he's going to need a decent amount of wood, not only to continue with horsemen, but to continue to have safe food over the long run.
Point out is the fact that Baltune is actually behind a villager. And 1.5, I would say. And this might just be because he was so focused on making these longbows. I don't know if the TC was idle in this case, but this is a very sticky situation to be in because you're supposed to be the one doing damage and you're supposed to be ahead. And these guys, while doing well, he needs to be very careful here because Byzantines does have that strong economy that can spiral pretty quickly. Now, Scatterbrained, he's floating a lot of resources, and I don't think he knows how he's going to catch up with these either. You can see all those villagers now back onto the wood line, but the food has just run out. And there's no berries this man can go on that's safe from the English push.
Yeah, and I mean, he does have those back berries that he's trying to wall. He's got a couple of villagers going to be able to do that. But because Baltune scouted this, you're probably going to be able to see this. And he did scout it, so he's going to be able to see it. Hopefully try to stay in ground where that scout is to make sure those walls don't get replaced. But the thing of it is, where those walls are, the longbowmen can just shoot over them. And that's exactly what's going to happen. The longbowmen just shoot right over one of the most annoying units that we have, just because of you need to put that wall so far out there to make sure that those berries were safe. They are not going to be safe. Scatterbrained does not have safe food now, and I know he's got about 1,000, 1,100, but give it about a minute and a half to 2 minutes, and then we're going to see it completely bottom out.
And just like that, you can also see the longbows off switching around. And Scatterbrained knows he's not going to be able to do any damage here. He's trying to get some damage done with those horses on the tower. And the longbows are just going to run around and do the same thing again. Now, in the outpost, he might find some willing or unwilling victims inside. But Scatterbrained is definitely on the back foot here. And we can see now 220 wood. He's spending every single bit that he has, and he's just running the villages back and forth to try and stay alive. Longbows are about to pivot yet again and snack on another 2 or 3 of these.
Yeah, because that's the thing. What do you have? He's doing perfect display of micro. Baltune is against a lot of these horsemen that are there. Longbowmen are targeting the longbowmen of Scatterbrained. There are not that many there, so they're not going to be able to one-tap spearmen. Longbowmen end up going down. Now there's nothing for these spearmen. And look at what those spearmen are doing. They're just right next to the longbowmen. They're not getting crazy. They're not moving around. They're not trying to do any damage. They just got to make sure that the longbowmen are alive. And they're playing the perfect defensive role in making sure that horsemen don't get a surround or anything of the sort. So, with that, Baltune has a military lead of 31-14, decent amount of spearmen, decent amount of longbowmen. And Scatterbrained is literally scattered. He's running all over the place trying to figure out what the hell to do. And to be honest, Wayman, I don't really have a good suggestion for him.
And you can see he's trying to find the answer in the gold, and he's chopping as much as he can. And the longbows now getting their ranged defense as well. So they're just going to be an extra load of spicy as they move forward. We can see here another tower we can put down a little bit closer this time. And the scout does get picked off. And Scatterbrained still ahead in villages, though. The idle time from the TC showing. But keeping in mind, these villages he might be ahead in. But most of those were idle. So that's why we're seeing such a heavy control here from Baltune. Currently 10 villages idle in his base. He's rerouting those bad boys onto the next part. But Scatterbrained knows he's not going to get gold for too long. So he tries to get as much as he can and backs right off.
Yeah, but look at, like, wait a minute, look at his food per minute. 2 minutes elapsed, and now he's on 0 food per minute. Those berries aren't safe because that wall's not good. He had to get a lot of gold to try to use a market to try to get something. Now he's going out to where those deer are a little bit on the western side of his base. If Baltune scouts that, that is your ball game. He doesn't have the wood to make outposts. So if he does make outposts, it probably won't end up being enough. Scatterbrained is trying to pick off some of the reinforcements. He's split the English army into 2 separate areas with a military count of 40-27. Maybe if you're going to be able to isolate one pack and make archers for yourself, as Scatterbrained is doing, that might be enough to try to tap some of those spearmen down, and it ends up becoming devastating. Let's see. This is Scatterbrained's time. He's got to make sure that he does something good in this fight, in this engagement, if he wants to take it. The spearmen are creating a choke around those longbowmen, but the horsemen are going to ride right past them. Archers from Scatterbrained trying to do the best they can at microing and trying to hit every individual spearman, and it looks like they will be successful in doing that. The military count now 29-18, so it's kind of going a little bit more in favor of Scatterbrained, but was that enough to hold?
Now, I just have a big question. What happened to all those villages? Because all of a sudden, Scatterbrained lost a lot there. And even though I felt like this was the moment he could come back, I feel like a few of his villages just disappeared. And these guys are about to disappear as well. A boar joining the fight. The horse is going to try to get this done too, but the longbows are just so spicy. They have upgrades. They have everything. They're just going to one-tap anything that looks at them even remotely funny.
Yep, that's a lot of food left on the table. He tried to pull, well, Baltune pulled the pork, actually, against some of those villagers, but obviously not effective. Now, for Scatterbrained, where the hell are you gonna go now? I'm just kind of like brainstorming with him, you know, trying to figure out where to go. You know, you might want to use, you know, whatever, some kind of other resource and use the market maybe, but you want to get horsemen and they're super food heavy and you have no access to safe food. Now he goes back to those berries down the south side, which is obviously going to be advantageous because the olive oil, he does have a cistern there as well. So really taking advantage of some of the mobility or lack thereof of Baltune just because of those spearmen and longbowmen. But it's going to make all of those villagers just continue to move over and over and over again. Now the spearmen get over there, the longbowmen get over there. and these villagers have to run away again. And it looks like for these spearmen, they're going to end up trying to take down that palisade wall. It will prove to be effective. It looks like he's going to continue to get on this berry patch and do the best he can. Longbowmen are going to be able to, just because of the range, might be able to outrange some of those archers. More villagers end up going down for Scatterbrained. It's villager after villager. That's 15, 16 total that Baltune tried to take down. And honestly, I don't even care if he wins this fight. I think he's done enough economic damage to make that much of an impact. Baltune got to pull those spearmen back up to the front line. Longbowmen trying to pick off some of those Byzantine archers. And I think there might have been enough. It might prove to be effective. He does not have that one-tap ability. Those horsemen are going to go down rather quickly. Now Scatterbrained has a military mass of 6.
And Scatterbrained honestly put up an amazing fight. He definitely showed us that he's not a player to be discounted whatsoever. A man whose name has not shown up too much is definitely showing us that there is some raw talent here, taking down the likes of Baltune for 2 games. But now, you know, when the villagers are pulled to fight this, the poor spearmen being intimidated, the longbows running through the tower, you know, the writings in the deer corpses lying everywhere, the villagers running for their lives. Scatterbrained does not want to call it just yet, but he knows what's coming. And those villagers running for their lives, they know too.
And you know, I mean, for Scatterbrained in his perspective right now, obviously he doesn't have the army to continue to actually try to take this fight, right? So you're really thinking about, okay, I lost a decent amount of villagers. You might be thinking about counter-raiding. Good luck. You're not going to be able to do that, because throughout all of this, Baltune has maintained tempo, maintained an elevated military count, maintained that lead. Where on the back end, he has 3 full sets of farms. So if you want to raid him, that's not going to happen. And if you do, that town bell will ring a ding-ding in his ear, so he will know what's going on. Now, Baltune going to be adding some men-at-arms as well. With that, just to create a little bit of, you know, defensive hold, a little bit of armor around a lot of the archers, the longbowmen that are going on for Scatterbrained. As you can see, Baltune's base right now at about 1,000 food per minute. And this might be the time, if he wants to keep making army, that's fine. He might be able to continue to make army while going up to Castle Age at the same time. And that's your dagger.
Now, with that amount of units streaming towards the villages on the deer, Scatterbrained must know that this is it. He's still making units. He's still trying his best. He's got a few on gold as well. But the longbows are enough to target fire these horses even. So the villagers go down. The horses are going to go down, even to just the longbows. And this is going to be so tough for Scatterbrained, because he knows he's given this his all. The spearmen are brave enough to go fight the tower. They're burning it down. The longbows are going to just be there for protection, standing around, causing more idle time on the villagers, and Scatterbrained is spending everything on his horsemen. But seeing those men-at-arms in the pack, you know that this is going to be tough to deal with. Because you've got archers, you've got longbows, but you don't have enough of either.
Well, that's the thing with this, like with the Byzantines and the kit that they have in feudal, right? I mean, obviously you can go for a different contract and go for javelin throwers. Begs the question if you'd have enough javelin throwers to actually make an impact. So he tried to go for longbowmen to try to take down spearmen and kind of rely on the horsemen. But the thing of it is, for Byzantines, you know, they're still feudal horsemen. They're still just normal horsemen. So are they going to have the tack, the strength to kind of take down a lot of these longbowmen? Probably not, because of how average they end up being. Now, Baltune is going to continue to bolster with these. Obviously, the horsemen did a good job getting around to those longbowmen. Not enough longbowmen, or not enough horsemen, I should say, for that to matter. And the tuna reverse sweeping. Getting a 3-2 victory over Scatterbrained. And, you know, we really thought that Scatterbrained was going to take this series. Not so fast, my friend. Baltune ended up pulling off 3 straight and making his way to the main event. So hearty congratulations to him. Also, a hearty congratulations to Scatterbrained, because he was 1 game away from that main event. Couldn't quite clutch it, but I hope that he's tremendously proud of his performance, as Anatan and the rest of the Belarusian community are as well.
Scatterbrained, next SC tournament, we'll be seeing you there at the top. This man, definitely, he can see what he's been able to do. And I don't know where he's practicing, probably a lot of customs. We're going to be seeing this man's name pop up yet again. If Anatan could do it, I think Scatterbrained could be next. Baltune, definitely a really amazing job at just keeping a cool head in all of this. You can see here the military count, he was always ahead. He lost that fight and it got pretty close, but that's just the power of already doing so much damage. So Baltune showing us exactly how to pressure your opponent with English, and it is okay to make a council hall on Cliffside against Byzantines. Don't look at just the king. There are other things to take on.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about the 2TC, Abbey, Kings, blah, 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 all that kind of build, but, kind of a bait. You went for the Council Hall instead. Could beg the question, maybe a Hippodrome could have been more effective, where you get a little bit of a Triumph ability. Might be one of the rare cases that it ends up being viable. But I'm sure both these players will be watching that film back, trying to figure out what they could do as Baltune gets prepared for that main event that is happening next weekend.